Philosophy is for the courageous, because when death is the hunter, there's no time for benign thoughts. So it will do you no harm to hear a cynic contend your religion, or hear a mason philosophize truth, or to consider the merits of heresy in an orthodox world. Life is a classroom, my friend. Learn to observe it from uncomfortable spaces, or suffer the consequences of cowardice and ignorance.
So we have this mysterious thing of man who also seeks to know. He seeks to know ethically that which is good. He seeks to know to a degree idealistically that which is true for him. He would like to live well if the effort is not too great. He would like to know more than he knows, first because he thinks he could earn more that way. Sometimes he would like to know enough to be able to console himself about his own uncertainties. He wants to know. The great desire to know rises strongly in the mass mind of mankind. And here we have the conflict between knowing and not knowing. And we have the big problem of the moment. The problem that has been argued and debated for years. Namely, can we know? What can we know? Can we know anything that we will not have to unknow at some later time? Is all knowing relative? Is knowing merely the collecting of the traditional belief of our race? Is the physician a true knower after he graduates from medical school? Is the lawyer a true knower after he has read Roman law and British jurisprudence? What is knowing? Is it the individual familiarizing himself with the past, with other beliefs, with the statistical material available on the subjects that interest him? Is this knowing merely the handing on of report? And we have this very strongly in education. And Neoplatonism points out that the fallacy here is that all knowing must ascend, that the end of knowing is that man shall truly know the truth, and that the truth is something that is apart from particular knowledge. A man may discover something of truth by learning to play the piano. But if he does not add this concept to something else, he will become a musician, but he will not become a truth knower. That truth is something total, and that all education must in some way strive for this totality, but it does not know how. Thus there has to be this truth that sets us free, instead of this neo-truth that keeps us in bondage. The Neoplatonist answers very simply that the only solution to this problem is to recognize that man partakes in his own nature not only of the attributes of truth possibility, but the very substance of a living truth fact. That the truth resides in the innermost parts of the conscious life of man, and that the great journey of the individual is from ignorance to truth, and that truth is something supreme, something infinitely sacred, something absolutely divine, and that therefore the search for truth is essentially identical with the search for all realities with which the human being is concerned. The individual who attains to the state of truth has discovered why he should live well and how he can live well. There can therefore be no truth, as Plotinus points out, that does not produce a change away from error in the actual life of the person who attains it. A person can be educated and still unmoral. A person cannot possess truth or be possessed by truth and be unmoral. The individual can become learned and still be dishonest, but the one who attains truth cannot be dishonest. Therefore, truth is a transforming, living thing, and that which attains it can never function inconsistently with that which it has attained. On this grounds, all knowledge is at the moment inadequate, for we have no form of knowledge which compels us instinctively, inevitably, and irresistibly to right action. We know much and still have to struggle with our own conscience. We know exactly what we should do, but we haven't the courage to do it. The truths we so-called possess are not dynamic enough to give us the vitality for the fulfillment of themselves in conduct. This is the great burden of Neoplatonism, and it is certainly the burden of Confucianism. For Confucius said, the superior man is one who is incapable of an inferior action. It isn't one who doesn't perform it because he knows better. It is the one who is incapable of it, because the instinct which has given him this superiority, moving from within himself, is irresistible.
Welcome. Well, how did you enjoy that little tasty taste? I found that from Brock Sart's website, his YouTube page. It's really awesome. It's filled with all kinds of Hermeticism. And I have been, speaking of which, I have been on a deep dive with Hermeticism for a while. That's why it's taken a bit of time to get this back to you. But we are off and running. Let me make sure I got this thing locked in here so we're all set. Good deal. Okay. So we're off and running here. I've been, as I've communicated before, I'm not a real big reader, but I love listening to lectures, and I have been listening to a lot of lectures since we last met. And I have come across some amazing information that is outstanding. I'm looking forward to presenting it. I've worked very hard on some of the maps that I've put together, psychological maps and perspective maps, and I'm really looking forward to presenting this material to you. Okay, so Before we get going here, I want to make something really clear. I'm not a guru, I'm not a sage, I'm not a teacher, I'm not anything special. I am just an everyday, average bloke just like you. And the best way to picture me is just simply as your friend. Someone who is going to be able to be honest with you, say things that a friend should say to be worthy to be called a friend. Because nobody wants a friend that tells them what they want to hear. Because if you want a real friend, you want someone who's going to be honest with you. And that's what I can present to you, is simply what I come across and conveying that to you as honestly as I possibly can. And that's really what I'm trying to do in these videos, is I'm trying to convey this alternate world, this alternate reality that surrounds us. And really the point of this video is to talk about something that can't be talked about. And so I understand completely that I'm approaching from a contradictive space, and that I'm not approaching you from a space that's completely rational, because a lot of the things we're going to be talking about today, or I'm going to be talking about, aren't rational. We're going to be talking about symbolism today, because you can't talk about God in words. You talk about God in symbolism. And since symbolism doesn't have any words, there you go. And so that's the conundrum that we're going to be talking about today. And I'm fully aware and understand I'm not living in some fantasy world, thinking that all these ideas that I have in my head, that somehow I'm right, or that somehow I'm gifted, or somehow I know the truth. Folks, all I can offer you is perspective. Okay? If that perspective helps you find your truth and find what you seek, awesome. Think of me as a lens. Think of me as a lens, and really nothing more than that. I simply can offer focus in aspects of life that maybe a number of other people couldn't. But hopefully through the work that I've done, and I've really worked hard to make these slides really smooth and legible and flowing. And so hopefully through all of that, I'll be able to convene with you guys in some way or sense, but primarily as a friend. And not someone who knows, and not someone who thinks that they're right. And let me be clear, that's really what differentiates me from, say, a scholar or something. The scholar will know that they're right, and they'll know why that they're right in many ways. I, on the other hand, approach this from the space of I know that I'm wrong. I know that I'm wrong because there's no way anybody knows entirely what's going on. So there's no way that anybody has it all figured out. It would be kind of crazy and ridiculous to belittle the universe by thinking that somebody could figure it out. And so my real approach is that we all are guessing here. We all, and some are basically better guessers than others. And I am just simply offering you some opinions in the forms of guesses when it comes to this realm. So make no mistake, I'm not trying to fool or kid anybody. I am not approaching this from a space of authority by any means. But a lot has happened. My heart is really pounding right now. My father has had some health concerns occur in the last few weeks. And both my parents are still alive. And so I haven't gone through the process of losing a parent. And so that has really impacted me in the last few weeks, because of just all that he is going through right now. And so not only do I ask for you to send good, positive energy and love to my father, but to, it's been interesting that this has happened, because this has added a gravity to the subject matter that I'm covering today, because what we're going to be talking about today is the ineffable God. And my father has spent his entire life in Christianity. He's a pastor and an author. He's an expositor. And so it's ironic that right in the midst of my doing this, that organically, naturally happened, that my father has his life concerns and medical concerns have become serious. And so I'm going to do my best to convey this information, because what I have for you today is beautiful. What I have for you today, and so I'm very excited to bring this to you, because I've worked so hard to pull this together. There are maps on here, there's information in here that I think a lot of you are seeking. I know I was seeking it at one time. And I was seeking it because I left the religion that I was in my entire life. I left everything. And when you do that, especially when you leave Christianity, like I've said so many times, all your existential questions are no longer answered. And so you have to go out and find for yourself what is God. You have to go out and find out for yourself who you are. You have to go out and find out for yourself if there is even a why for our being here. And if we are here for a why, what is that why? And all of these massive questions that you shape your life upon. And so this lecture is going to offer some insight into some of those questions, and that's why I was so happy to find this lecture from this audio lecture that I just played a portion of to you from Manly Hall on the doctrines of Hermes Trismegistus. This gentleman is probably the most knowledgeable person I have ever come across in my life that in regards to Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, and Gnosticism. And he offers a history and insight that is basically from those of the losers, because the winners wrote our history. And so when you look at history from a heretical perspective, and you no longer buy into the ideas and concepts and insistencies that the West has instilled into all of us, you find that it's a very different picture that brought us to where we are today. And when you see that it's a very different picture, it has an effect on you. And again, this is so ironic that what I'm going through personally is happening right as I am going through this incredible word picture that Hermeticism offers to anyone who is willing to put forth the effort to find out about it. What I find that I'm doing now is I am relating these ideas and concepts like I would relate a friend to you, like I would introduce a friend to you. And it's sort of like when you see my opinion and when you see my perspective, the question is, what do you think? And just like someone introduces you to a new person you've never met before, you're gonna have an opinion about them. You're gonna have thoughts and feelings about them. And it doesn't mean that you're right about them, but as far as you're concerned, that's your opinion. And that is, folks, that is exactly what I'm doing here. So don't think of what I say. If I say something that doesn't resonate with you, or that is really antithetical to how you disseminate and understand the world, right? Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. This is that you are seeing a perspective here. And it's sort of like looking at a sunset from where someone else is standing and saying, no, your view is incorrect here of the sun. If you walk over to where I was, that's actually the correct view of the sun. It's the exact same thing. It's like walking up to Bob Ross and saying, actually, you're not drawing the pine tree correctly. You need to draw it like this. And it's sort of like, what gives you license, and why would you get this funny idea that what is in your head is going to manifest in the same way that it manifests in mine or someone else? And so as we walk into this whole setting that I'm going to be sharing with you today, keep that in mind. Keep that in the forefront or the back of your mind, so that what I say doesn't threaten you or intimidate you or cause you to feel like, I hate this guy because he says things that I don't like. Don't let it get you like that. Don't let it tackle you like that. I had to actually learn some of that in responding to folks in public, because how you respond to people in words on a page are very different than how you respond to people in person. And because I don't take myself all that seriously, I can sometimes be very nonchalant in how I respond to people, and they might be very passionate in what they're communicating, and I just take it as just another view. And not that there's, just like my view is just another view. It's the same idea. And so I don't take these things on. And so I'm very carefree in how I respond often, and I'm working to do better in the comments. But when someone approaches me and is communicating that they're right and this is how it is and I'm wrong and this is why I'm wrong and so on and so forth, again, it's like walking up to Monet and saying, you're drawing all these flowers incorrectly. That's not how you draw a flower, Monet. This is how you draw a flower. This is what it looks like. You see, this is philosophy. And so there's a whole lot of non-absolute in philosophy. It's very wiggly. Alan Watts used to call the world the straight and square people and the wiggly people, and these two people don't intermix very well. And I see the world as very wiggly, and I don't see a lot of straight lines. I see a lot of very wiggly lines. And so I have that same philosophy in how I take on a subject like God. And so that's the introduction. Here we go. Let's get going with this to properly name this thing. This is Nature as Identity, Part 3A, Ineffable, the Divine Pymander. Now I've broken this up into possibly 3 different sections because simply of the volume of slides that I have to present to you, and the maps that I've drawn, and what is going to be necessary to elucidate what I have taken time, so much time, to get onto the screen for you. And so there's just no possible way that I could do this in 1 video. There's probably not a way I can do it in 2, but I do know that I can do it in 3. So I'm just guessing here, this will at least be Part 3A. And that will orient us to which video you're watching, and we're going to be talking mostly today about the Divine Pymander, and we'll get right into that. Let's again reiterate the truth from Nikola Tesla. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. All of my nature series, Nature as Identity series, is based on this philosophy from Nikola Tesla. And so everything that you're going to be hearing in this video, just like parts 1 and 2, are going to be oriented to that philosophy, to that idea. Okay. Now this map here should be very familiar to you. First of all, just take a look at it. I was told in the comments that I go through my slides too quickly, that I talk too quickly. So I'm trying to get it right. I'm trying to do better. Honestly, I'm not upset at all. I really want to do better because I want everyone to feel very comfortable while they watch my videos and slides, and that everything is very clear, that I'm not trying to deceive anybody. I'm not trying to pull any punches here or deceive you or anything like that. I'm simply trying to render to you a reality that is larger than the one you were raised in. Okay, so the last time I explained this map, I did a really bad job. So I apologize for that. I really messed up not only what I was trying to communicate. I was correct in the science, but I wasn't correct in the what is implied, what is really going on in the deeper sense when you look at this map. Okay, so this map, what you are looking at is the movement of the Earth and our solar system, I should say, along the galactic plane. Now, when you look at a galaxy, just picture in your mind a galaxy, notice how they're always they're very often in a pinwheel shape. They're spinning. And there's a black center or a milky white center that about which there are wheels or legs of a pinwheel. We here in the Milky Way are in a 5-legged pinwheel galaxy.
Let's face it, Earth's movement pattern within the solar system is very complex. However, its movement through the galaxy is even more intricate. The Milky Way galaxy is a massive and complex system which includes a vast amount of stars, gas, and dust spanning across over 100,000 light-years in diameter. One of the most exciting aspects of our galaxy is its rotation. Like a huge spinning windmill, the galaxy's spiral arms trail along as it spins. This rotation makes the stars and gas in the galaxy move in circular orbits around the galactic center. Earth is located in one of the spiral arms of the galaxy, about 25,000 light-years from its center. Just as Earth orbits the Sun revolves around the center of the Milky Way galaxy at a speed of about 143 miles per second, completing one orbit in almost 230 million years. This cosmic journey takes the Sun, and therefore also Earth, through different regions of the galaxy and introduces us to different cosmic environments. Determining the speed of the Sun relative to the center of the galaxy involves searching for new, young stars that have only recently formed and are therefore still in their birth orbit. Next, Taking an average of how these stars move relative to us, we can deduct that the Sun is drifting forward at the speed of about 3.1 miles per second, in towards the galactic center at a speed of about 5 miles per second, and up and out of the galactic disk at about 4.4 miles per second. This small, peculiar motion has huge implications for the path that the Sun and solar system take through the galaxy. The orbit of the Sun around the center of the galaxy is not perfectly circular either. Instead, it follows a slightly elliptical path, oscillating above and below the galactic plane.
As we move along the pinwheel, we're spinning around the black hole, and as we do that, we're moving up and down in this serpentine shape, just like the season that I showed you in part 2, where the seasons are a serpent, as the Sun moves up and down upon the face of the planet, meaning its radiance and its intensity. Okay, in the same way, we are moving up and down in and out of alignment with that galactic plane. And it takes many, many years for this to happen. And this map, and what this map is showing you, is our movement upwards as ascending and descending up and through the galactic plane. In the movement of our planet reflects not only what we are, a sine wave, but how waves propagate. And we are a mirror image of that if you look at this picture. And so that red line is us, the Earth, as we move in and out of the galactic plane, alignment with the galactic plane. So that black line you're looking at there in the center, that says Kali, right there on the right, you see that in the yellow? And it says 1,200 years on either side of the Kali. Okay, that's the Kali Yuga. And that is the darkest period because, and this is where I screwed up in the last one, you are getting the least amount of information, the least amount of density from the galactic center, which is what is called in Gnostic terms the pleroma. It's that milky white orb-like shape that you see in the center of our galaxy, in the center of our Milky Way galaxy, so to speak. Okay, and so when you are in direct alignment with the center of the galaxy like that, you're getting the least amount of electromagnetic information from the center of the galaxy because there's all these planetary systems, dust and gas and so forth, that have accumulated on that plane of reference. And that's an electromagnetic phenomena. The reason why the rings of Saturn are flat and the reason why the galactic plane is flat is because that's an electromagnetic expression. The way the electromagnetics are moving cause an accumulation of density at that plane of the galactic or of the black hole. Okay, it's a magnetic function. All right. And so when we are directly in line with the galactic plane like that in the center where it's the black there, that's where it's a vacuum as far as information from the center of the galaxy, electromagnetic information. And so as we move above and below that plane, we get more and more information, the higher, and as we see on this graph, lower that we get in comparison to that plane. And so the ancient people who knew this, and how they knew this, we don't know, but the ancient people knew not only that we were in a galaxy, but that we were moving like a serpent up and down in relationship to the galactic plane. They knew this without telescopes. Okay? And they actually knew it so well in what was going on that they named the periods of time that it took to travel along this plane. Okay. So imagine yourself in a stadium. And when you are on the ground level of the stadium, all of everyone's heads and all the activity that's going on in front of you is obscured by the crowd. Meaning the field itself is obscured by the crowd because you're down on the level of the field. And so all the information and data, meaning the gameplay that's going on in the football field, is you can't really see it that well because it's obscured by all the heads and everyone that's at the ground level. But as you, say, were to walk back in the stadium and move upwards, as you go up, you can get a better and better view of the field And therefore, the information that's on the field, meaning the data of the game and the players and all that kind of stuff, football and everything, you can see. You can actually see very well, because as you move up higher, there's no more obstruction between you and the field. Now, that's the exact same concept of what is happening on this line. And as we move in and out of the plane of the galaxy, we get a better and better view, quote unquote, of the black hole. And therefore the information that's coming out of the black hole, like the information on the field that's coming off of the field, can reach us as a planetary system in the same way the light or the energy from the field can reach your eyes when you get at a higher level. And this map here shows that we actually go into quite a high ascending plane as we move along the galaxy. And this emanation from the galactic center, this electromagnetic information and radiance that comes out of the galactic center, radiance of power, affects the Earth. It affects our history. It affects what happens. I'm gonna be showing all this to you. It affects our understanding. It affects our perception. It affects the actual events that occur on this planet. You're not gonna believe how well it relates. And so the ancients knew that when we went into direct alignment into what they called the Kali Yuga, which was when we were in direct alignment with the galactic center, they knew that this was a very dark age, a period of time, because very little information was reaching us as a planetary system because of all the interference between us and the galactic center. All right. So then you can see how there's this idea that as we move out from that Kali Yuga, out from the center of that, things are getting more exciting. There is more activity and there is more information. Wouldn't you say that in the last 5 years you've gathered more information about reality and life than you gathered in all the years you lived previous? The last 5 years have been more dense in information, and you're finding out like what the heck than any other time before that, right? You'd have to agree with that. Okay, that is a real function, folks, of what is happening as far as the galactic plane is concerned. The way I'm going to lay this out for you right now, you are not going to believe what you're going to see, and I'm going to roll with this as it goes. So I'm going to play it out just like you see it. All right, so here's the map. You're not going to believe this. First of all, those words on the right there, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali, that's Sanskrit, okay? And the translation of those words is there on the left. So the top one is truth. The next one is collection of 3. The next one is 2 ahead, and lo and behold, of course, the Kali Yuga, Kali, the black one. Now, how did the people who wrote Sanskrit know the timelines, ask yourself this, know the timelines and how to name them in regards to what was actually happening to the planet? Because this is a very old map, meaning those words are very old. They predate people that should have had this technology. This should also clue you in that the world isn't what it seems. So they named, look at what they named the top one there at the top. They named that one truth. Isn't it interesting that when we have the greatest perspective of the galactic center, they named that period of time truth? And what you're about to find out, you're not going to believe it. I'm going to show you. Okay, so I've highlighted the years. It's 52,000 years to complete one cycle. That's what this is showing you. And so there's an ascending period and a descending period. Do you see that? Okay, so right there, where it says ascending, moving away from the obscuring central mass of the galactic plane. Thus, there is more exposure to the galactic center emanations. What does that mean? You're more exposed to truth. Isn't it interesting that they named the top portion of the crest of the wave thousands and thousands of years ago? They named it truth. Do you think that's coincidence? Do you think it's coincidence that they named the lowest density time, when we're getting the least amount of emanations from the galactic center, they named that the black one? You're going to be really hard-pressed when you find out, when you watch human history unfold, and I'm going to show you that human history, the history of the world as we know it, follows this map to a T. Pretty much to the year. And this is describing 50, 100,000 years of time. You ready? Watch this. All right, zoom in. Okay, Great Pyramid Civilization, founded 45,100 BC. Notice, they are on the upswing at that point, according to the map here of where the planet actually is. This isn't a fakery. This isn't a guess of where the planet is. This is actually where the planet is. And look, lo and behold, the Great Pyramid Civilization is founded right on the upward swing just outside of the Kali Yuga. And this births the great ages of civilization and humanity, Lemuria, Atlantis, Tartaria, etc. You guys, a number of you have asked me about that. This would be the time span of those civilizations right there. You're looking at it. And they were following, they had this golden age. 34,300 BC would have been the peak of not ancient Egypt, but far further back than ancient Egypt. Would have been actually the highlight of that age. And what you see as that line keeps going, they went all the way through the Kali Yuga, came all the way out the other side, and then they buried Göbekli Tepe and others to preserve the knowledge. Do you think by chance the people knew from that past age what was coming? Do you think the technology of the pyramids and what we know about them now, do you think by any chance they had any inclination of what was about to happen in 11,500 BC? I think it would be foolish to think they wouldn't know. In fact, I think they would be absolutely sure of what was about to happen. And I think that they were actually so absolutely sure about it that they tried to convey this knowledge, this information about the universe, about God, about reality. And they tried to bury it in the math and geometry of the pyramids so that when other ages who lived through the disaster that was about to happen could hearken back, maybe, just maybe, they would clue into this knowledge from the ancient past, that the pyramids could actually survive and reach a distant age yet to come, thousands and thousands of years away. Okay, well that should give very good reason to why they buried Göbekli Tepe and these others, Göbekli Tepe and others. And then of course we know the attack came. This is the cataclysm, the Younger Dryas. Now, I understand fully, I had a number of letters about this, I understand fully that there have been many cataclysms. I am sure, actually, that when they went through this Kali Yuga here between 23,500 BCE and 22,300 BCE, I'm sure there were a bunch of cataclysms there. Why wouldn't there be? And there would be all kinds of chaos that these structures would have to survive. And so there's no doubt that there have been many cataclysms in our past, no doubt. The one that I always reference, though, is the biggest one that's happened since then, as far as we know. There very well may be, I understand there very well may be, more information that shows that there was a flood actually about 500 years ago, and that everything was buried right then. Everyone needs to understand, I'm completely compliant with those ideas. It's fine. I just don't hold to them right now. But I'm happy to integrate them, no problem, into reality as I understand it, should that be the case. Happy to. I'm not clinging to any system. I'm just simply a researcher, a reporter, a friend who's coming to you and saying, hey, these are the patterns that I've seen, and this is what makes sense to me. This is what makes the best sense to me. You very well may have found patterns that make much better sense to you. And that's wonderful. I celebrate that with you. That's why I often will say to people in the comments that are quite passionate, congratulations. I'm really glad that you figured it out. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. Honestly, that's great. If what you're saying turns out to be the truth, can't wait to pat you on the back. Congratulations. So it's not condescending or any of that, because I fully realize that I'm not right, you're not right, the scholars aren't right, nobody's right, because nobody could possibly know what's actually going on. Okay, there just isn't enough information available right now to us here on the ground level to know. And so you got to be in sort of special groups, special echelons in order to know deeper truths. And so what I'm trying to do is at the ground level with you and me, just show you here on this very basic map, this is why they buried Göbekli Tepe. This is why they tried to preserve the knowledge in the pyramids. And this is why they were built to sacred geometry, to emulate to you. This is the truth of the universe, that sacred geometry is God in mathematical form. As we continue, then of course, agriculture. After the disaster, we have agriculture. That's around 10,000 BC. And then, as I've said many times before, Egypt was an inheritance. Now, why do I keep saying that? And I've always been saying that. Because the Great Pyramid Civilization was founded in 45,100 BC. That was a little bit of time, just about 40,000 years or so before Egypt was discovered, was inherited by ancient people. Because everything, remember, everything was destroyed in the flood. In the cataclysm, the Younger Dryas. Anything bigger than a chicken, you didn't make it. And so the cataclysm, this flood, ruined history, buried everything in mud. Okay, anyway, Egypt's inherited. They didn't build it. They didn't build the pyramids. It was inherited. And then along comes Rome, of course, and they formed the Catholic Church in AD 325. Now notice, this is the key thing to notice. Look at what happens. We are descending from, and a lot of people call agriculture the beginning of the end of humanity, and there's reason for that. We won't get into that philosophy, but the point is, agriculture begins right at the descending phase. From the point of agriculture until, well, we're going to get there in a minute, but that line in the middle is 500 AD. That is the beginning of the Dark Ages. We have the Roman Catholic Church forming in 325. And obviously, we're going to be looking at the history that formed that before that. We're going to be looking at that period today. But the thing I want you to make sure and see is this. Look how we are right smack dab in the Kali Yuga when all that was going on. Nobody was aware of it, but the ancient shamans and so forth. But the general populace in the West, they're unaware of this map because as far as they're concerned, they would have no idea that this exists. They wouldn't understand how the workings and mechanics of the galaxy. That would not be understood to this Western culture, because they're surviving out from the flood. Okay, so regardless if they knew it or not, they still right there, you see we are in the midst of the Kali Yuga. You see these are descending phases until finally we get to AD 500. I'll show you. AD 500. Look. The Dark Ages followed exactly the location of the planet in reference to the galactic center, to the black hole. Look, our history, as you and I understand it, look, we are following the map precisely. That's why I'm so convicted that this is real, that this is what actually happened, because this is following the timeline so perfectly, what we actually think happened in the past. And then you notice, look right there. And then you have, when did you have the Renaissance that got us out of the Dark Ages? Look, right at that next phase where it goes to grace, 1700 CE, 1700 AD. Look at where we are. Right where, look at this, hypernovelty manifests. Do you see that? Right where hypernovelty manifests is right where we are now. And this is right here at the ascending phase. We are in the ascending phase, meaning we get more and more information from the galactic center, which means there's more and more truth emanating out via electromagnetism from the galactic center. And this is why Terence McKenna was always talking about in 2012 or 2020, whatever he called it, 2000, whatever it was. He said that's when hypernovelty manifests. Those were actually his words. Those were his exact words, in fact. This is to what he was pointing, and he figured that out through the I Ching. He did a math called the time wave theory. I can't remember the exact name of it, but he figured out through the mathematics of the I Ching, he got down to within 100 years or so of the actual space that is called hypernovelty, which aligned perfectly to the alignment of the planet to the galactic plane. And I'll be honest with you, I've watched and heard hundreds of McKenna lectures. He's never one time mentioned this.
We are living through, in a 67-year period that stretches from 1945 to 2012, a compressed version of a larger historical epoch, 4,306 years long, that also ends in 2012. So that we have reached, by this reckoning, the late 700s right now. This is what we are living through. And ahead of us lies the Gothic Renaissance, the European Enlightenment, the discovery of the Newtonian mechanics, the discovery of the New World. That all lies ahead of us. It all has to be compressed into the next 22 years of time. And that is what accounts for the crazy quality of modernity. What accounts for fads and fashions. You know, hemlines are rising and falling in a rhythm based on the rise and fall of empires millennia ago. And these things are as causally linked as the orbit of the Earth is linked to the sun, you see. Because we are being drawn toward the attractor through shorter and shorter epochs. And not only must the entire last 4,000 years of history be compressed into this 67-year period from 1945 to 2012, but there is a 384-day period preceding December 22nd, 2012, when the last 67 years and the last 4,300 years have to be compressed into that. Then there's a final 6-day period when all of these things are compressed again. And so do you see what's happening? The spiral is tightening as it goes faster and faster. The resonances are impinging. The thing is getting nuttier and nuttier and nuttier as computers link all cultures together, all informational barriers dissolve. Everything is becoming connected to everything else. Not only everything in the present moment, but all past moments as well are being drawn, compressed, squeezed toward the production of the transcendental object at the end of time, which is nothing less than all time, all space, shrunk down to an atomic dimension and handed back to us.
His coming to the conclusion of being in the point of hypernovelty is right at the point where we're coming out of the Kali Yuga. Now, he probably was aware of that. If I know McKenna, he probably knew that. But the point being, he nailed it. And that is following exactly what should be happening in regards to our location. Now, check this one out. Here we're calling this the Great Awakening. You want to know the uncanny thing? Here, check this one out. Look at where it aligns in phase to where the Great Pyramid civilization founded in 45,100 BC. It is the identical place. If you think of the implications of that, we are therefore in perfect harmony for the way of complexity, for the way nature manifests. Because we are following the same pattern. We are following the pattern that the Great Pyramid civilization founded, and they grew into this unbelievably illustrious civilization. And we see the history of that in our records that we see on the planet. Folks, we are right now, at this very moment, we are at the same place they were. And what do you know about epigenetics? What do you know about morphogenetics from Sheldrake? Once something happens one time with a society, it tends to happen again and more quickly. We're following that principle. There comes a point when you have to say these aren't just coincidences. There comes a point when you have to accept the fact that there is a reality larger than you can comprehend at work, whether or not you know it, whether or not you're aware of it. It's there. And it's possible that perspectives like this will help you see it. And see it so clearly that you can't deny it. That's exactly what I was talking about at the beginning of part 2. To make God within nature so relevant to you that you can't deny it. To see it so clearly that you would literally have to be purposefully trying to reject it to not see it. It becomes this crystal clear. Okay, so I took this whole thing, this whole map, and I made a vertical map for you to bring us into reference for Hermeticism. Now I'm going to let this thing roll out as it's going right now. So as you can see, this is just a vertical image of what we were just looking at horizontally. Okay, We had the Great Pyramid Age, invasion of Earth, the cataclysm. Remember, I consider that an invasion. I don't think that the Younger Dryas was natural. I think that was purposefully placed. Okay, agriculture begins in 10,000 BC, supposedly, 8,000 BC. Egypt inherited, right around, this is ancient Egypt, right around 3,000 BC. Babylon is founded about 1,000 years later, you see. And then the Golden Age of Greece there in 400 BC, just before the Golden Age of Rome in AD 100. And as you know, after Alexander the Great conquered the world, basically all of the surrounding land of in the Mediterranean Sea, they crumbled because he had thinned out their ranks so badly that they couldn't withhold. And so, as Joseph Campbell put it, the entire Western Hemisphere was like an oyster out of its shell. And it was ripe for the taking. And this is how the Cynics and the trade routes opening in 1 AD, 2 AD, this is how they so easily, these Eastern traditions moved right into these Western cultures, and chaos immediately ensued. And so you see that exact same timeline referenced in our location of this planet, as you saw as we were moving into the Dark Ages. This is the leading up into the Kali Yuga, is what you're seeing happening here. Okay, and so Catholic Church founded 325. You can see this on the left, and then the Dark Ages, and then what I like to call the Industrial to Medical Age from 1700, which is the Industrial Age, and the Medical Age began around the turn of the century, right around 1900. Okay. How does this relate, Chuck? Well, it relates in regards to the Emerald Tablet and Hermeticism. Now, Hermeticism is very sketchy in its past and its history, as you're going to see here, because the church did everything it could to destroy it. And that should be a lesson right there. And, you know, look at the behavior of a group or institution or person. That will render to you their truth. Not necessarily what they say, but look at their behavior, and that will render truth to you. And so I'll even add the pink here before I go into this even further. We see the church destroys all the mystery schools in AD 375. Hermeticism ends in 500 AD. And we see Rockefeller destroys natural medicine schools in 1918, and it's the same MO as the Catholic Church, which went out and destroyed all the universities. Now, what were these universities teaching? Well, right around that time, from around AD 100 to AD 500, there were institutions and universities that were called mystery schools. And they were called mystery schools was because the information they had was mysterious. It was esoteric. And so there was a hidden aspect to reality, and you needed to be initiated to understand these things, because you could use the information to harm others. Because nature is benign in the sense that nature can be used for good, and it can be used for evil, and it can be used for neutral. Neither. It's benign. Its energy flows in any of these spaces, and so you can get information that could be used to mind control people that actually should have been used to open their mind to spirit. But you can use it in the reverse, in that you can close their mind off to spirit in the same way that you can open it. You see, and through abuses and these kind of things, you can close off a mind and turn it in a certain direction. And this all comes out of this mind and spiritual knowledge that comes out of the ancient pyramid age. And so this all ties into the behavior of the church and why the church tried to remove and destroyed the documents, the green tablet, and these things that were written to preserve the philosophy which came out of this ancient pyramid age. And it should tell you something when the church systematically went through and literally burned those universities down, destroyed and made illegal. Imagine if during the Dark Ages, if you practiced Hermeticism, you were a heretic, and they burned you at the stake. So consider that, just step back, take your emotional response to that out, and think to yourself psychologically, why are they doing that? Why is the church working to destroy Hermetic universities, Neoplatonist universities, Gnostic universities? Why are they going in and systematically, purposefully destroying these mystery universities? You know? And therefore, you see the exact same, you can take to understand, you can see what Rockefeller did when he came in. He destroyed all natural medicine. I have to be careful what I say here because they'll ban this video. But he came in and systematically removed all the universities that were teaching anything but his petrochemical medicine. And then he hired scientists to write the medical books that would then be presented to the students who were taught medicine. So nobody learned natural medicine anymore because it was systematically removed by Rockefeller. And in the same way, nobody learned these other philosophies of understanding God and understanding these deeper principles because the church destroyed them all, made themselves authority, made themselves the voice of God, and then that is all Western society was allowed to know. What does that tell you? That's not the behavior of a society, of a group that wants natural development, that wants society to develop of itself so. That's the sign of a group that's trying to come in and seize a society in the same way that Rockefeller did. You are seizing a society. They seized, the Catholic Church seized the spiritual society. Rockefeller came in and he seized the medical society. And when you seize the heads of society like that, you control the society. This should clue you into why medicine is the way that it is now, because it's a control system. Why the church is the way that it is now. It's a control system. It controls the spiritual function. This, in other words, the church claims this is the only way you're going to have a relationship to God is through Jesus because you're a sinner. It's a control system. And in the same way, the medicine system. I went in to talk to my cancer doctor, and he said, you're going to follow the protocol. I have a protocol that you'll follow, and when you follow that protocol, you'll come out on the other side, you'll be all good. And I said, well, I'm not going to follow the protocol. And he said, well, you're out. And I'm like, what? You're not going to just take my blood pressure, take my, take test my blood, things like that, and make sure that, I'm getting better? Nope. If you will not follow the protocol, you're out. Get out of my office. And he said that, get out of my office. If you're not going to follow the protocol, we have nothing left to say. I actually have the recording somewhere, buried somewhere. But he actually kicked me out of his office because I wouldn't follow the protocol. In groups and out groups. And as you know, I've done entire videos on in groups and out groups. And you can see how this is psychological treason. This is to seize a person's development, take control of it, and direct it in a certain way. And this is exactly why you don't know anything about Hermeticism. It's why you don't know anything about Gnosticism. It's why you don't know anything about Neoplatonism. It's because the church came in and destroyed them. And this is why when someone says, well, you can't believe in Hermeticism because there's no evidence that it's real, there's no evidence to support it. The reason why there's no evidence is because the church destroyed it. That's the reason why people make poor decisions in regards to their medical situation, because they have been educated by a group that has no interest in healing them. None. In the same way the church had no interest in saving anybody. None. Control. That's it. It's a control function. It's a control institution. It's an agency.
A lot of people don't know how we got the Bible at all. We Westerners got the Bible thanks to the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church and members of the church wrote the books of the New Testament. And they took over the books of the Old Testament, which even by the time of Christ had not been finally decided upon by the Jews. The Jews did not close the canon of the Old Testament until the year 100 AD, or thereabouts, at the Synod of Jamnia. And then they finally decided which were the canonical books of the Hebrew Scriptures, and embodied them in the Masoretic text, the earliest copy of which dates from the 10th century, early in the 10th century, AD. The books to be included in the New Testament were not finally decided upon until the year 382 AD again, at the Synod of Rome under Pope Damasus. So it was the church, the Catholic Church, that promulgated the Bible and said, we are giving you these scriptures on our authority and by the authority of the informal tradition that has existed among us from the beginning, inspired by the Holy Spirit. So you receive historically the Bible on the Church's say-so. And the Catholic Church insists, therefore, that the Church collectively, speaking under the presumed guidance of the Holy Spirit, has the authority to interpret the Bible. And you can take that or leave it. Because obviously, the authority of the Bible is not, first of all, based on the Bible itself. I can write a Bible and state within that book that it is indeed the Word of God which I have received. And you're at liberty to believe me or not. Hindus believe that the Vedas are divinely revealed and inspired with just as much fervor as any Christian or any Jew. Muslims believe that the Quran is divinely inspired. And some Buddhists believe that their sutras are also of divine, or rather a Buddhic origin. The Japanese believe that the ancient texts of Shinto are likewise of divine origin. And who is to be judge? If we're going to argue about this, as to which version of the truth is the correct one, we will always end up in an argument in which the judge and the advocate are the same person. And you wouldn't want that if you were brought into a court of law, would you?
This will then change, as I mentioned earlier, this will then change your perspective of all of your existential questions. Who you are, why we're here, what has happened. Because you then will start to see, oh, we are actually in a larger pattern than the history that's been offered to me by this closed society, by this totalitarian rule that has kept us out of the information, out of knowing the truth, since long before Rome became the Catholic Church. When you begin to realize that, you become free. You become free. And that actually is a reference. I'll just show you here this. I skipped this earlier. Why does truth set us free? Because it frees us from ignorance. You see, ignorance or not knowing is the cause of harm, and awareness is the cure. Knowing truth removes all discordancy. In case you don't know what discordancy means, it means disagreement, incongruity, and conflict. What is the kind of world that you have grown up in? A world filled with discordancy, disagreement, incongruity, and conflict. I did an entire video on how the West has been raised on conflict-oriented religions. And I render in that video very clearly how that isn't healthy. That it actually causes here's the next line, fear, resistance, aversion, anxiety, irreverence, irrationality are all offsprings of ignorance and lead to harm. You see? So it is knowing truth that is going to remove that discordancy. And in the same way, when you see patterns like what I'm showing you and I'm about to show you even more of, this renders to you a truth that was unavailable to you before you began to watch this video. And so by having this perspective, what I just showed you with that map of the galaxy, when you have that perspective, you realize you are within a much larger mass, a much larger reality than what has been offered to you through history, through these groups that have intentionally kept you ignorant and in a state of fear. And that's why fear is not the beginning of wisdom, it's the beginning of enslavement. That's why we've been raised in the West, have been raised in a conflict-oriented structure, because that keeps people in fear. It keeps them enslaved, it keeps them victimized. And when you're victimized, you can be controlled. And what is the theme of our society? Control. What was the theme of the work of the Catholic Church? To control the society. And you control the society by keeping the truth from them, by hiding the truth from them. This should raise enormous red flags as to what you know from the Catholic Church. You know, that should cause concern there. In the same way, when you find out through evidence that there is a predator that is living in your neighborhood, that's going to open your eyes to whenever your kids are outside or that person comes out of their house or your kids are in front of the house, you are now aware. And because you are aware, you know the truth of the situation, and therefore you're going to make better decisions. Imagine how much better your life would be, or less painful your life would have been, had you known what you know now. And it was through the trials and tribulations you experience that you learn the truth. And so it's costly to you, but you're a wiser person because of it. And so because you're a wiser person because of it, you can perceive the world more deeply than you did before you made those poor decisions. And so you make better decisions. Therefore, when your kids are playing in front of that house that you now know has that predator in there, you're going to either get your kids away or you're going to be ultra careful and make sure that your kids never get too close. And so by seeing the larger patterns, you begin to understand better and better, not only what's going on with the earth and what's happening now, but who you are, and obviously who God is, even though God can't be put into the term who. Okay, so what we see is there are a number of stories in regards to the history of Hermeticism. So Hermeticism, there was a tablet called the Emerald Tablet. The underlying fundamental core understandings of Hermeticism were carved into the Emerald Tablet. And there's all kinds of folklore in regards to what happened to the Emerald Tablet, did it exist, and so forth. And one of the stories is that it was discovered by a Roman general, possibly could have been Alexander the Great, possibly could have been this gentleman I found here, Apollonius, in AD 90. But anyways, the story is that there was a grave site marked Hermes Trismegistus. They dug down deep into the grave and they found a man sitting on a throne holding an emerald tablet. And this emerald tablet had carved upon it the doctrine of Hermeticism. And so it was that tablet exactly, wherever and whenever it was found, that the church absolutely either went in and destroyed it or it's in the Vatican archives, one of the two. And so this was, the emerald tablet was in a tongue that was from an earlier age. So, sort of like if you were to read the King James Bible, and it has thou, thus, thy, and it's in this tongue that we don't speak anymore. But the King James, you can know where the King James Bible comes from, what age it comes from, simply by the way it's written, the thous and thus and thar and all this kind of stuff that's in it. You can, and so you can put a date on that because you know when people talk like that. All right, it's the same thing with the tablet. It's descent of ideas. How it puts together the world, how it expresses these doctrines and characteristics of Hermeticism that hearken an earlier age, exactly pointing to where these dotted lines are going to the Great Pyramid Age. The theory is that, the point is that it very well may be that the Emerald Tablet was a preservation of knowledge that didn't come out of Egypt from 3000. It actually came out of the Great Pyramid Age at 45,000 BC. And this is why it posed such great and terminal threat to Christianity. And we're going to be studying that as we walk into this. But this is why it posed such terminal threat, because it oriented a person to God, to nature, to whatever it is, this unspeakable essence. It oriented the person to that without any kind of religious need. Through pure observation, experience, and perspective. That's it. You don't need to be smart. You don't need to be like gifted. You don't have to have any of that. You can see this and understand this enigma without any institution, intermediary, or intervening between you and that. There is no separation, you see. And what the church had to do was to pin a spike into the connection between the human being and this essence, and claim its own authority and say we are the voice of that essence. And so as long as you follow the rules, the way we write the Bible and the way we've done everything for you, you're good. You see, and you can just tell by the whole way that goes down, you know, you can see right through it and you can see, no, that's agenda. That is an agenda. And we're gonna open up that. So that is what this here is showing you in the timeline. There was a Hermetic doctrine found in Luxor, in the excavations at Luxor in Egypt, and there were stone tablets from Amenhotep III in the 1920s that were found. These harken back to Egypt, and like I said, the tongue in which these documents are written do not match the tongue from the Egypt of 3000 BC. They're from a tongue that's of an earlier age. So what I have done is I have found an absolutely unbelievable recording that is going to set up our next map. And this recording is of Manly Hall, and he is going to describe and orient everybody to what the situation looked like for the general public right there at the time of 1 AD, right there in the 1st and 2nd centuries BC and AD. Here we go.
We have to have a certain amount of factual background. Lacking in this, we are unable to orient and integrate, or to keep our minds clear in our present thinking. So if we sharpen our thinking a little, it will do us no harm in our daily living, where we have been inclined to save the mental instrument, protect it from labor, and come too quickly into easy believing, in which there is never any really adequate reward. We have taken this evening 3 parallel systems for consideration: the Hermetic philosophy, the Gnostic philosophy, and the Neoplatonic philosophy. Now, it's more than a coincidence that these should all have flourished in Alexandria in the opening years of the Christian era. It is also not a coincidence that all of these were closely involved in the rise of Christianity. Nor is it by any means accidental that in a strange way, as St. Augustine points out, these 3 sects were in large measure responsible for Christianity. Now, this does not mean, he did not certainly intend to imply that Christianity had merely copied these doctrines. Rather, that Christianity, confronted by 3 schools of the magnitude of these, was forced to make very definite plans of its own. It was forced to overcome at an early date as many of the divisions within its own structure as possible. It required a united front against a world that was not ignorant, not stupid, and not gullible. It therefore was a challenge, and it was this tremendous challenge that to a large measure resulted in the final Council of Nicaea and the Christianizing of the Western Roman Empire. If it had not been for these sects, it is very likely that Christianity might have dissolved in its own internal discords. But confronted by these large enemies, it gathered its resources, defined its position ever more clearly, and finally came to a condition of ascendancy. Thus they formed the adversary, which sharpened the wits of the early Christian fathers and caused them to give much more scholarly attention to their own doctrines than might have been their original inclination. So we have these 3 schools, and the order of them we should also consider. For antiquity, the Hermetic philosophy was probably slightly the elder. In other words, it probably arose slightly earlier than Christianity, 100, 200 years, possibly 300. It also extended downward through the Christian era and down to the 4th or 5th centuries AD. The second in historical descent was Gnosticism, which belongs to the first Christian century primarily. It arose probably not later than AD 30 and continued to exercise a considerable influence down to also to the 5th century AD. The third of this group was Neoplatonism, which probably arose in the latter part of the 2nd and probably somewhat in the early part of the 3rd century AD, and continued to exercise considerable influence until the 5th century. Thus these 3 organizations coexisted with the early Christian development. And by the nature of their teachings, this coexistence was again more than coincidental. For when we study these 3 systems, we observe marked parallels among themselves and to Christianity. The question as to who borrowed from who has always been a moot one, and we will not even attempt to explain and interpret it. We can only say that these persons lived together, that they lived in speaking distance of each other, and that they were united by a common tongue. We know, for example, that St. Augustine was highly conversant with Neoplatonism. and apparently did not hold it in essential disregard, although he publicly criticized it on some occasions. Actually, a large part of his own philosophy was certainly influenced by Neoplatonic thought. Trying to analyze the structure of these three non-Christian groups to determine their essential keynote, what was the essential difference between them? The more you read about them, the less difference you observe, until a number of writers have practically given up in despair any effort to distinguish their essential doctrines. These doctrines are so close that they are regarded almost as identical. Actually, they are not identical, because each presents a particular perspective about something in which they all have a common interest.
Okay, now as you see, I've highlighted this here in yellow, and this is the key phrase for the conclusion for what he was saying. They are not identical, the doctrines that these disciplines are teaching. They are not identical because each presents a particular perspective about something in which they all have a common interest. And this, folks, is the perennial philosophy. Now remember when I mentioned this earlier, and I think it was part 1. The perennial philosophy is the philosophy that undergirds this idea that there's a perennial force, this undergirding force behind all of everything that's unspeakable. And there are folk ideas, there's folklore that talks about that philosophy, that perennial philosophy that transcends time. Because the perennial philosophy isn't oriented to the folk. You see, the perennial philosophy is itself so. It's a truth that underlies all of time. Whereas your folk idea is only relevant to your local people. That's why they talked funny in the 16th, 17th century, and the King James Bible is written like that, because they talked funny like that, where we call it funny now, but they talked differently like that. That was their folklore. That was their lingo. That was their language. You see, and that's how a person communicated then. All right, so you would communicate the perennial philosophy, this idea of God, in that tongue, because then you're relevant to your society. Okay? And so the perennial philosophy is the metaphysic that recognizes a divine reality substantial to the world of things and lives and minds. And that, folks, is what Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, and Hermeticism are all pointing towards. This is going to remove your fear of them. They're pointing to this metaphysic, this unspeakable aspect. That's the exact same thing that Christianity claims to control, claims to own. Because the Christian believes only Christians go to heaven, only Christians can truly know the one true God. It's an exclusive in-group, you see. And so all the West has been brainwashed, has been gaslit with the idea that this is the only way of understanding that ineffable. You see, and they have, that religion has taken ownership of that, claim of that. And as we move in perspective higher and higher in perspective to the black hole, folks are realizing, no, actually there's a deeper truth that transcends the ideas that Christianity presents, that don't require a religion to understand God, you see. There is a metaphysic, a folk idea called Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, that allows you to cognize, philosophize, have relationship with, have understanding of the ineffable, without any need for religion, without any need for atonement, without any need for apology, without any distance there. It's actually coming into the flow that is already there. You see? Okay. And so the people in charge, those who are running the world, namely the Roman Empire, they had to formulate a philosophy, a religious philosophy, that would shape the society in a way that that society would remain compliant to them as the authority. That's the key thing to know. And so by understanding how they came about that authority, how they came about victimizing everyone, is going to render to you why Christianity functions the way that it does and why it presents God in the way that it does. Because it comes out of this time frame, meaning the language, the folklore, as we, as a modern society, understand it, comes basically out of the New Testament, and comes out of this idea of sin and atonement, and comes out of this idea that was presented in the Testament as the church handed it out. which is the key thing, because it's always the winners that have been writing history. This map here is called the Spiritual Ethos Mapping Chart. I completely invented this entire thing. No, I didn't copy this from anyone. This is entirely out of my head. Okay, so on the left, to get you into reference here, on the left we see Hermeticism, Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, and Christianity. Below that are the years that they were viable. So Hermeticism was most viable and was forming and organizing right around 150 BC. So it's the senior of all of these. It's the elder of all of them. And then Gnosticism came about right around AD 30. And then Neoplatonism, following the work of Plato, around AD 200. And then finally we have Christianity coming in 325 and saying, this is it. This is the final absolute law. This is how the whole spiritual system works. Okay, now notice that all Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and Neoplatonism all die out by AD 500. They're gone. They're gone. They have been removed because if you practice these philosophies, the church is going to kill you. They're going to come out, they're going to burn you at the stake. Okay? So there's actually no freedom here. Remember how I said during the Kali Yuga, there is no freedom because there is great ignorance. And so people are enslaved to their own mind. That's why fear does not lead you to wisdom. It leads you to enslavement. It leads you to enslavement. Fear is not the answer. That's not what you want to seek. Okay, we have here, I have listed at the top there, across the top, you see questions. And right here, the first one is a statement. What is the spiritual icon for Hermeticism? Well, that would be nature. Okay, so nature is the icon, is the embodiment of Hermeticism. Okay? What is the spiritual icon of Gnosticism? Well, the nous, the mind of God. So this is the embodiment. If you're going to embody God and you're a Gnostic, God is going to be the nous, the mind, the great overmind. You have a mind in your head, and then there's the great overmind. And obviously, and as we all know, the mind does not exist, because the mind is not something I can hand to you. In the same way, the mind doesn't exist, because the mind is not something that can be handed to you. It's something that you see through perspective. You see through higher thinking, through higher awareness. That's how you become aware of it. But it is not available to the ignorant person. It is not available. You're going to have to engage your higher consciousness, your higher awareness, to understand these larger philosophies of the world, which bring meaning to it, which bring appreciation to it, which bring love to it, right? Okay, Neoplatonism, its spiritual icon is truth. Okay, what is truth is what redeems the individual, what frees the individual is truth, right? It frees you of ignorance. So the whole point underlying Neoplatonism is the pursuit of truth. In the same way, the whole point of Gnosticism is the pursuit of mind. And in the same way, Hermeticism, the pursuit is nature. And also in the same way with Christianity, the pursuit is Jesus. Jesus is the icon. Jesus is the icon for God. And it is from Jesus, the embodiment of God, all of Christianity constellates, resonates, vibrates because of, in the same way truth is that way with Neoplatonism, in the same way nous is that way with Gnosticism, or nature brings about vibration in Hermeticism. Do you see where I'm pointing at here? Okay, what is God to the Hermeticism, to the Hermetic individual? Absolute law. Absolute law. What is God to the Gnostic? Absolute good. Whatever is good is God. The more good it is, the more God it is. Absolute knowing is the God for Neoplatonism. Remember, truth? Knowingness. Knowingness frees the individual. Truth, knowing truth, that is where God is found, because you find God in truth. Isn't God truth? Is God not truth? God is 100% truth, right? Well, absolute knowing then is what God is, because you know the truth. You see where it's pointing? If you know the truth, if you know the absolute truth, well, then you're God. You see, so there's a pursuit there. There's a pursuit there. Okay, and then with Christianity, what is God? God is absolute purity. God cannot even look upon sin in Christianity, because God is absolutely pure. The sinner, the person, this body has to go away before you convene with God in heaven, because the body is carnal. It's sinful. It is not pure. You see? And so because the body is your carnal being, that's because you die a sinner. Even if you're a Christian, you still die a sinner. Even if you're saved, you're still a sinner. Okay. So because of that impurity, that is separated from you. That's a doctrine in Christianity. When the body stays on the planet, and the planet is doomed to be destroyed because the planet is filthy. The planet is doomed. Okay, existentially. And so when the person dies, the body is left, the carnal body is left, and then the pure being, right? The soul, which is purified by who? By Jesus. And this then allows you access to God. You see how it works? Okay, so where is God? To answer the question, God's in heaven in Christianity, right? God in Neoplatonism is in truth, in the light. In Gnosticism, God is in the good. Okay, so if it's good, it's God. Meaning the more good it is, the more God it is. Okay, and so we see then Hermeticism, where is God? God is in nature. God is nature. Nature is God manifesting. What is sacred geometry? Sacred geometry is the language of God. And it is through the language of God that we have all of matter, because all of the universe and everything in it is all based in sacred geometry. And I'm going to show you more of that later on in the video. But the point being that nature then, therefore, is not only the icon, but what is God? God is nature. What accesses God? Okay, so in Hermeticism, science accesses the practice of alchemy. The scientist is who accesses God in alchemy. So the person who wishes to access deeper and deeper characteristics of God, understandings of God, truths about God, would do that in Hermeticism through science, through the practice of alchemy. And as the person practiced, and as the person began to know more and more deeply nature through science, obviously, the science of nature, biology, as the person knows this more so and more so, they access deeper and deeper truths, realms of God. You see? What accesses God in Gnosticism? Well, theology does, the theologue. This is similar to in Christianity. It is through theology, the doctrine of theology, that the Christian, that the Gnostic, realizes God. Gnostic is discussed in circles. There are philosophical circles that constellate the idea of nous, the mind. And so they have a theology, a doctrine about the mind that they study. And so if a person wants to access more and more God, they must engage in more and more theology, more and more contemplation, and this will realize God for the Gnostics. In Neoplatonism, the philosopher accesses God. This is why Socrates taught. He was a philosopher, and he knew God in the sense of Plato. And so Plato shared his insight, his very deep insight, in his understanding of God through philosophy. This is what is the undercurrent of Hermeticism, of Gnosticism, Neoplatonism, is philosophy. Philosophy. And so it's the philosopher in Neoplatonism that knows more and more God. So the more philosophy you practice, the deeper your concepts, the deeper your theories, probably the more contradictive you're able to handle the world, meaning not having a final say, the closer you'll be to God, because there's no final say in God. You see how it works? And then finally, what accesses God in Christianity? Well, grace does, because God is absolute purity. So it is the sinner. It is the sinner that must be purified that accesses God. You see? So it is grace that will allow the sinner to access God. So how does the person access God in Christianity? Well, they say the right prayer. They believe the right doctrine. And this will access God, because their God is exclusive. Unlike these other ones that don't make a claim as to what exactly God is. Right? God is just a manifesting of nature, but that's not, nature is a very large subject matter. So you could claim pretty much everything falls within nature, whereas with Christianity, you got pretty much Jesus and Yahweh. You have the embodiment of the philosophy in these individuals. And so in order to access these individuals, there has to be a correct belief in place. There has to be a correct doctrine, a correct theology in place. Because if you've got the wrong theology and you've got the wrong doctrine, you can't access God. Certainly not when you die. Or you're going to be, in the Christian's terms, you're going to be accessing the wrong God. And if you access the wrong God, well, then you're really in trouble, because it's probably the devil. You see. So this is just different ways that these groups orient themselves. You see? Okay. What is evil to the Hermeticist? Error. So the way I avoid evil, the way I occlude evil, is through practice, and through practice I commit less and less errors. So error or evil in Hermeticism isn't this sin idea like what comes out of Christianity. It doesn't have karmic baggage, in other words. It doesn't follow you after you die. You just are committing error in your life, and you learn from those errors and better yourself from those errors. In this way, every error is an asset to you because it teaches you the deeper principles. So this is the philosophy of the Hermeticist. So we have the Gnostic, what does evil matter? It's similar to Neoplatonism, darkness, which consumes matter, because matter obstructs light, and light is good. And when there is more and more matter in the Gnostic's mind, this is klesha, what they're referring to. When there's more and more matter, when there's more and more clinging and clutching to life, more anxiety, this moves you further and further away from the mind of God, because your mind is becoming consumed with matter, with materialistic concerns, with concerns of the mind, which is klesha, which is going to only do you harm. And so one must release, I'll skip ahead here to where is truth to be found, through kenosis. The Gnostic releases from the concern of matter, from the concern of the mind, from klesha, releases through the idea of kenosis to self-empty. So the ideas of the self, the concerns of the self, are de-objectified, are removed through the process of kenosis, through the removing of your mind and taking on the mind of God. And so Gnosticism was a big promoter of the idea of kenosis, to self-empty, which is very much a Buddhist idea. You can see some of the Eastern philosophy, and in fact, all of the transformation process of Hermeticism, you could follow exactly through the chakras in the Eastern system. It's related to Buddhism. It wasn't until the church came in that they said, no, if you believe incorrectly, then you have to be in prison because you're a threat to society. You're going to teach society the wrong doctrine, and if you do that, then you're acting as the devil. This is what controllers do. That's fear and threat. And so this is how they shut down these philosophies that freed the person, that allowed the person to pursue and develop and raise their awareness. And the church was not interested in anyone raising their awareness. They were interested in keeping people captive. They were interested in keeping people within the philosophy of the church that the church handed them, meaning the disease they handed everyone. So everyone remains sick, because no one's going to try to get out, because everyone dies a sinner. Every sinner will fight to stay a sinner until the day they die. You see, that's a disease, a person who does that. That's a disease. That's a washing of the discernment from a person's objectivity, when they think one thing about themselves and they are unwilling to consider any other philosophy that doesn't orient them back to that assumption about themselves. And because, as we see here, it is the sinner through grace that accesses God. See, this is why the Christian cannot release from being a sinner, because that actually is what accesses the grace which accesses God. You see? And this is how you're caught in the conundrum. And you can't get out until you get a bigger perspective, and that's what I'm trying to do now. What is evil to the Christianity? Satan, sin, obviously. And this sin is pursuing you, just like Satan is pursuing you. And so it is sin that the Christian must have forgiveness for, must have grace in order to access God. So evil is found in sin, and sin, uniquely in Christianity, follows you after death. So if you haven't committed the correct prayer or committed to the correct belief, and you die, well, that sin is going to follow you after you're dead. And it's going to doom you for all eternity, you see. None of these others present evil in that kind of tenacious way. They don't put that kind of persistence on mistakes and troubles that you engage in your life as though there's some type of evil force that's trying to get you. They understand that this is just error is a part of life, that matter, darkness, these things are a part of life. And it is simply a means of working with them as they are, in the same way that a sailor works with a headwind. They have to tack. And so in the same way, you have to philosophically tack when it comes to evil. It's not handled, it's not digested, metabolized in the same way good is. It's very easy to metabolize good. Evil is a much more difficult characteristic that has to be metabolized, characteristic of nature, characteristic of life. And so if you approach it with the baggage and with the conditions that Christianity puts on it, you never get past it. You're caught in that conundrum, in that circular dialogue, and you never escape it. It's why the sinner dies a sinner and fights to stay a sinner. They cannot escape the dialogue. They cannot escape the philosophy that has been put into them with fear and victimization. The idea of evil has this entirely different sticky connotation to it. And so there's an obsession there. This is the key thing you should understand. When it comes to evil, unlike these other ones here, there is an obsession with evil there in Christianity. This is the reverse psychology of purity. This is what happens when your icon, your religious figure, is of ultimate purity, is there becomes then an obsession with the antithesis of that, which is like filling the void. When I pull the drain on the plug, the water can't wait to get out of that tub, you see? And so there's a pressure to leave a space that is condensed. And so we have a space condensed with purity. And it is that teased obsession within the psychology of Christianity, because you're never not a sinner, you're a sinner till the day you die, that causes the dysfunction, that causes the victimization and the ability for a government to come in and control that society, because they are teasing, they themselves, this conundrum of purity and sin. And they are playing in that field, reciprocating over and over again in that field. And so therefore they remain adolescent in their philosophy because they can't escape that conundrum. And so this is a fantastic way to take control of a society, because the only thing those people know is what's been put in their head. Okay, what redeems humankind? Well, in Hermeticism, alchemy. Like I said earlier, the practice. This redeems, this raises the person's awareness. That's what I mean by redeeming. It raises their consciousness, redeems them from material obsession. This is what Hermeticism does through alchemy, through the practice, through the seeing of God in nature and in the practice that you take part in. This is what raises your awareness and consciousness, brings you into a higher state of truth, and then therefore you live a life of less and less error, of less and less anxiety, because you are working with the world as it is, practicing in the world as it is, just like, again, the sailor who is tacking with a headwind. They're still getting to where they need to go. The Hermeticist is pursuing awareness, pursuing consciousness. Keep that in mind. In Gnosticism, what redeems? Knowing good. So the Gnostic is pursuing the good, pursuing knowing what is good, because what is good for me may not be good for you. And what is good for you or good for the society may not be good for me. So what is good? It's not as easy a question to answer as you might think. And so the Gnostic is pursuing this because that good is where God is found, you see. And then in Neoplatonism, the virtue within. So in Neoplatonism, this is an even deeper idea. The idea is you tease out the virtue that you already have within you, the humanness that you're born with, the care and compassion that is born inside of you. Compassion isn't put into you. Love isn't put into you. These come out, and they are teased out. And the way the Neoplatonist teases them out is through philosophy. Through discussing these deeper principles, one raises their awareness in the same way that alchemists raises their awareness in their practice of alchemy, in their understanding the sacred geometry that forms the world, that is the math of God, the voice of God that becomes flesh. And the alchemist knows this because they are practicing and pursuing that in the same way the Neoplatonist knows you're not a sinner when you're born, you're virtuous. I am an outpouring wellspring of love. That is exactly what the human being is. And so by learning about this, becoming aware of this, this virtue comes out of me and my behavior. This is why virtue isn't a choice. It comes out of you. You are a virtuous person. It is not something bestowed upon you because you have all your sins forgiven. That's not what makes you virtuous. It doesn't make you virtuous to go and learn a whole bunch of laws from the Bible. That's not going to make you virtuous. That's not going to make you a virtuous person. You're virtuous already. It's already there in you. It just has to be teased out. Well, then there's not a specific belief that's necessary. Just experience is needed there. You see, there's not a specific doctrine that that person has to follow in order for virtue to come out. Virtue is just going to come out when you have compassion with another person, when you identify with them. And that's why I'm doing this series on identity, because it is through identity that we find love. that we find understanding, that we find truth. And what is truth? It sets us free. You see, this all go together, and that's why it's important to know these details like this. Where is truth to be found? Well, to the Hermeticist, it's found in nature. And that makes sense. You should be able to follow that pretty easily. And then in Gnosticism, we talked about earlier, where is truth to be found? Well, it's found in kenosis, the death of the self, the death of the mind of self-concerns. This is where truth is found through the process of kenosis, to self-empty. You see how this makes sense? In Neoplatonism, inside the now, so the truth can only be found in the now. This is why worrying about the future or regretting the past keeps you out of the now where truth is found. In other words, worrying about the future is a distraction that keeps you out of the truth. And then regretting the past is a distraction that keeps you out of the truth. And so the Neoplatonists knew the only place I'm going to find the truth is right here in the now, the present now, right where I am now. The most amount of truth available to me is available right now. Okay. And this is because there's virtue inside of you, as the Gnostic or as the Neoplatonist taught. The virtue is inside of you, and you find that you realize that virtue in the now. Because virtue isn't in the future, it's not in the past, it's expressed now, just like compassion is expressed now. If I express compassion to a person who's passed away, I'm too late. If I express compassion to them before they're sick, I'm too early. But if I express compassion to them right now while they're sick, I'm right on time. That's where the truth is found, and that's where fulfillment is going to reside. This is what's going to provide the juice in life is going to be found in the now. The juice in life that gives you encouragement, that gives you love and passion for living, passion about yourself, passion in who you are, passion to know others. That's all going to be found through the now, which is where compassion is. Okay. And then finally, where is truth to be found in Christianity? Well, it's found in the Bible. So it's the truth, all the truth that I'll never forget how many times I was told this growing up. All the truth you need to know is in the Bible. Everything you need to know is right in there. Every truth you need to know to live a life of harmony and truth and understanding is found in the Bible. Do you see how that's brainwashing? When you take a mind as vast as yours, in a nature as vast as we live in, and say everything can be all whittled down to this book. Everything you need to know. Every single possible truth that you really need to know to live a harmonious life and a peaceful life is found in this book. Well, isn't it interesting that the entire Bible is based in conflict? Good versus evil. Good overcoming evil. The quenching of evil in the end. The big battle of Armageddon in the end. The beginning sin, the fall of man in the beginning. Then all the turmoil in the middle. And think of all the Israelites and all that went down in the Old Testament. And all the harm and killing and so forth. And then look at the New Testament presents spirituality as a battle. You have to adorn the armor of God. There's a great lion that prowls about the earth waiting to devour you. You are in conflict, friend. And this book orients you to conflict. And you can see then how, well, there's no way that can be the ultimate truth because it's orienting me to conflict. There are certainly great perspectives in there that absolutely can help the individual, but there are also perspectives in there that are extremely harmful, that being separation. The idea that you're separate from God, the idea that you're separate from others, that there are in-groups and out-groups, that there are conditions to love, because you must meet the condition to realize God's love. What's the condition? You must accept the grace. You must believe correctly. Then you meet the condition. Well, when I put love into condition like that, what do I do to love? I steal all its virtue. I steal all that makes it love, its spontaneity. And you can see then how it can become extremely harmful when you get locked into a particular set of beliefs. They can really harm you. Okay, is God inside or outside? Well, to the Hermeticist, yes. And this simply means everything. To the Hermeticist is very pantheistic. Everything is God. Polytheistic. Everything is God. There's nothing that isn't God. So yes, God is inside and outside of everything. Whereas in Gnosticism, God is outside, separate. The mind. You have your mind, and then there's the mind. And you must remove your mind in order to be in the mind. to be one with the mind. You see, so that mind is outside your mind because your mind isn't that mind. Do you see? There's inside-outside concerns there. In Neoplatonism, God is inside or outside? Inside, because God is in everything. It would be similar to the Hermeticist idea. It is more concerned with inside and outside than the Hermeticist would be. The Hermeticists would be more wavy in their philosophy when it comes to where is God? Or is God inside or outside? And then obviously in Christianity, God is outside. It goes back to the purity question. God cannot be a part of any kind of impurity. Okay, well, this is why the Christian is so hard for the Christian to understand that everything is one. Because then there's no separation. Well, if there's no separation, well, then sin isn't separating anything. You got a problem there in the philosophy. And that's where the contention with Christianity would lie. The Christian would never say that everything is God. They would never say that. They would say that God is a force outside presiding over all of nature, but certainly not nature. God presides over. That's why God instructs humankind to have dominion over nature. It's this idea of separation, conflict, and dominion over. And this is just an emulation of God, separated and has dominion over humankind. And so they're using that similar philosophy, but it just further more deviates, more separates, more separation on top of that separation, you see. And the more you separate like that, the more fragmented you become, and the more chaos you invoke when you do things like that. Okay. Is God both good and evil? Yes. Yes, absolutely, to the Hermeticists, because nothing isn't God. Whereas in Gnosticism, no, absolutely not. There's separation there. Same with Neoplatonism, it doesn't. Or with Neoplatonism, it doesn't matter. I meant to say same with Christianity. It's the same as Gnosticism. Absolutely, God is not both good and evil. Absolutely not. In fact, if you look at Revelation, what you see is ultimately the Christian believes that there is no more evil anymore. That evil is completely destroyed. And think of how nutty that universe is that doesn't have any impurity. And we talked about that in the last video. Well, then you don't even have a universe anymore because there's no matter, because there's nothing impure. See where it takes you when you take these smaller philosophies and apply them to a bigger picture, they fall apart. And this is what I just shared with you is a great example of that, of how philosophy falls apart. And then finally, this last one. And this relates back to what we were talking about, or what Manly Hall was talking about, in who the societies were that were around at the time of the inventions of these philosophies. And what we notice, and let's just go ahead and jump here to the next one here. What we notice is that at that time, people's lives have been destroyed. Rome has been destroyed. Rome no longer exists because Alexander the Great thinned out their ranks so much so as he conquered all the worlds that surrounded the Mediterranean Sea, that there just simply wasn't enough culture, society, and Romans left to fill in all of these lands that he plundered. And folks, these are folks that have been plundered. These are not people that converted to Roman icons and Roman spirituality and Roman understandings when they were destroyed. They kept their spiritual icons. And so just because Rome went in and ransacked all these cities and put a leader there to try and lead all these people doesn't mean they bought into it any more than you buy into the current government that we have. It's one of those situations whereby the entire land is filled with people that are unhappy and destitute. And so they are seeking for continuity. They're seeking for a world that's as congruent as the world that they had before theirs was destroyed. And this is why the church got the idea, if we orient everyone to the same spiritual philosophy, there won't be all these conflicting traditions. There won't be all these conflicting groups that, think about it. How much is the Christian going to gel with the Buddhist and the Buddhist philosophy? There's no way these two people are going to come together if each one is really convicted in what they believe to be true. These people are not going to come together in their spiritual philosophy. In other words, there's going to be constant conflict there. And you know as well as I do, when you find out things about people that you don't like, there's a resistance that forms there. There's a lack of continuity that begins to fester, you see. And the Roman Catholic Church knew this. And the conflict within society was not going to stop until they basically made spirituality law and forced the issue. And so what Christianity, come back to the empathetic question here, what Christianity did was it offered an empathetic story for the person. It offered a philosophy that met the person where they were at in the sorrow and martyrdom that they were existing in, because the central figure of Christianity is a martyr. And so people found in the figure of Jesus an empathy and compassion that the Hermeticist can't offer, because nature is merciless, right? The Gnostic can't offer that kind of empathy because it's a mind game. It's theology. There's not a whole lot of love in theology. It's pretty prickly. And you also have to be a theologue in order to fully grasp it, right? And then with Neoplatonism is offering you truth. Well, sometimes truth can be very hurtful. Sometimes there's not a whole lot of empathy in a lot of truth, you know, because learning the truth is a destructive process. Because mind expansion is a destructive process. You see, and so there's not a lot of compassion there in truth. You see, in many ways, some truth has compassion, but there's not a lot there. Whereas with Christianity, man, you've got this guy that's the martyr, whose life has been ruined by society, who is being illegally persecuted and is being tormented and harmed by groups. And people can relate to, at that time, could relate to a figure like that. You can relate to someone like that. And in today, think of today's society and how our society has been a conflict-oriented society. These people need empathy. We're in a society that has been raised in war and conflict. And so love, empathy, compassion, these kind of things are going to speak very deeply to the person. And is there a whole lot of compassion in Hermeticism? Think about it. Is there a whole lot of compassion in Gnosticism or Neoplatonism? These are not compassionate. They're not oriented to compassion. They're oriented to philosophy. They're oriented to perspective, which isn't necessarily compassionate. It's compassionate in one sense, but it's not compassionate in another. And so Christianity, though, the entire subject is compassionate. It's even saying, in the end, you win no matter what. So even if it all dies and it all goes bad, it doesn't matter. In the end, everybody wins. Your society wins. God wins. So it had a hand for any person who needed one. It had a spiritual offering for any person that simply needed to very quickly convene with God. They just simply said a very quick prayer. They just simply had a very simple understanding about themselves and who they are. They're a sinner, and that's all that they needed to know. So if I'm a farmer who's plowing the fields and raising a family, I don't have time to go out and practice Hermeticism and alchemy. I don't have time to go to the Gnostic school and study philosophy. And same with Neoplatonism. I don't have time to go to the Neoplatonist school and sit around with Plato and talk philosophy when I got a crop to harvest, when I got kids to raise. And so that person is not going to calmly sit beside the campfire, grab their cool mead, and sit there and chill and contemplate the universe for days and days on end, like you would need to do with the Gnostic. The days on end in the classroom. Who has time to go to class when you're raising a family? When you're trying to defend your land? You got time to go sit and listen to Plato philosophize about life? No, man. No, there's no time for that, bro. No time. The Hermeticist, do I got time and all the money it's going to take to buy all the alchemy and equipment I'm going to need to go out and do the practice in nature and perform the alchemies there in nature? Do I got the time to do that as a farmer? 7-day-a-week job? And is that what I'm going to want to do in my time off in the winter? Is that really what I'm going to want to spend it doing? You see? They needed an empathetic philosophy, an empathetic religion that reached to them at their level and said, I love you. And you don't need to know or understand any geometry. You don't need to know any theology. You don't need to know any of this stuff out of Neoplatonism. None of it. Just simply know you're a sinner. You can be forgiven if you accept Jesus. And if you accept Jesus, you're good. It meets you in the space that you're in. It doesn't require any extra study. Look at here. Any further study required? No. Look. Any equipment books are needed or equipment needed for Christianity? No. It gets at your level. This is the point I'm making. Does humanity awaken or are they saved? They're saved in Christianity. These other ones require work. How difficult is it to raise your awareness and consciousness? How much work do you have to do? Think about it. Think of how much work you have had to do in the last 5 years to awaken. Think of how much of your life has been destroyed. How many friends you've lost. Seriously, how much family you've lost, how much money you've lost. Your vocation's been destroyed, likely, if you've awakened. Okay? Well, that's painful. Does a person who's just had their farm ransacked and their wife and kids all taken from them and they're just surviving, are they really interested in having to go out and practice Hermeticism, Gnosticism, or Neoplatonism? No, dude. They're looking to be saved. They're hurting. They need an empathetic voice and an empathetic hand. This is a society that is desperate. Think of this. This is the Dark Ages. It is doom and gloom, folks. It is bad news everywhere. This is the only light. Christianity is the only light for these people. It's the only empathetic, compassionate verbiage that's coming out of the West that can reach these people. Look at the next one. God is realized by means of nature, knowing, understanding. Look at the last one, forgiveness. Does forgiveness require any work on my part? No, I'm forgiven. Grace is there. Simply believe correctly and you're good. That's all you got to do to realize forgiveness. And then with understanding, with Neoplatonism, Gnosticism, knowing, and Hermeticism, nature, okay? How do I find understanding? Through pain, through suffering, through work. That's how I find understanding. That's how I find identity. Because it's not easy. Life isn't easy. Navigating life isn't easy. You see? And so God is going to be realized within that navigation to the Hermeticist, the Gnostic, and the Neoplatonist, but it's not with the Christian. God is known and realized through forgiveness. No work required. Just accept the gift. I'll never forget how many times when I was in church, the pastor saying, as if it's so simple, all you have to do is just accept the gift. That's all you have to do, and you're good. You're free from the sins that you commit. It's all good. You have a God that you can pray to anytime. That will be there, right there for you, anytime. You're all good. You don't have to practice anything. You don't have to have special equipment. You don't have to know theology. Simply a little prayer. That's all you need to do. And the hope, peace, reassurance, relief, it's right there for you. And every single time you ask for forgiveness, it's given to you. You see how easy a sell that is? Do you see how easy it is for a person to commit to a smaller consciousness? Because can the Christian know a world that doesn't contain Jesus? Can they philosophize a world that doesn't contain any sin? Are they even intellectually available in those concepts? No, they are not intellectually available. Because their world is composed of sin. It's composed of forgiveness. It's composed of atonement. It's composed of grace. That's it. And so that can preach to a destitute society. And what was the society right around 300, 400 AD, 500 AD? Desperate. And then finally, look at the last one here. Conditional ultimatum. None of these, Hermeticism, Gnosticism, and Neoplatonism, has an ultimatum, but there is a very big ultimatum at the end of Christianity, which is if you don't believe this stuff, and if you don't accept the grace and the gift, you're done. You're done. It doesn't matter what you believe after that. You're done because you got the fundamental wrong. That's an ultimatum. That's how you form a victim. You put an ultimatum in front of him. It's like with the situation, that's the best way I can put it, that we just went through in like 2020, 2021, if everyone remembers, okay? We were filled with ultimatums and conditions during that time. Do you remember when they were victimizing society with fear and threats? And they were saying how it was going to be a long, dark, cold winter, and it was going to be this horrible event if you didn't accept what they were offering, and that you were going to die this horrible, terrible, atrocious death. Those are threats, and that's exactly what hell is to the Christian belief system. It's a threat at the end of the whole thing. So it says, yeah, it's your free will, yeah, it's your free choice, absolutely, you can reject all this, that's no problem. But if you reject it, you're done. You're done. God will not be able to forgive you. You are done. You will not be forgiven. You're done. And so, are you really free in that question, or is that an ultimatum? You see, when you have someone that says to you, here's your problem that I'm telling you that you have, and I'm now also telling you this is the only solution you have. Are you free, or are you just within the programmed material that they've put into you? Because you're not really free if you think you're really free. You're not. Because you've already been victimized with the idea that something's wrong with you, in the same way they victimize society by saying to all of society, if you don't get this injectation, if you don't get that, then you are done. You're doomed. You're doomed. You're finished. So there's not really freedom there. It's like they said, oh, we didn't take your job. Well, actually you did, because you said if I didn't do what you said I had to do, then I would lose my job. So it's not really freedom. And so they stand there and say, well, it's so easy. You just do what we have to say. You just do what you have to. You just do what we say you have to do. And it's the same thing the pastor's saying on Sunday. It's so easy. Just do what we say you have to do. Just believe this way. It's so easy. Why would you reject it? Why would you? That's exactly what the Catholic Church offered all these destitute people. Why would you reject this philosophy that we're giving you, this religion that we're handing you? Why would you reject this? Only a fool would reject this. And then they killed people that rejected it. The point I'm trying to make here is, this wasn't organic. What was happening at that time was victimizing a society, controlling a society, containing a society. The information you have about yourself, in other words, to this day, is false because you're not a sinner and you don't need to be saved. You see, this is how you dispel from that. Okay. With that in mind, we now begin to look at the Divine Pymander. Now, as I open up this slide, look here. What is the Divine Pymander? Well, first of all, the Divine Pymander is a book. It's a set of, originally a set of 17 fragments from which this document, this ecclesiastical document of Hermeticism was developed. The first thing that caught my attention, my eye and attention with this thing, was what a Pymander is. A Pymander is a shepherd of men. Did you think that that term originated with Christianity? That term, shepherd of men, actually originated with 45,000 BC Egypt during the Great Pyramid Age. That's not exclusive to the Christians. There's actually a heretical teaching, namely in this Divine Pymander, that shepherds human beings, and it shepherds them with their own virtue and vitality that is already within each of us. It teases it out. The Divine Pymander works to tease out your virtue, to tease out your identity, to tease out your understanding of not only the world but yourself. And it's a shepherd that does this. Think about this. It's a shepherd that would do this. If you have a flock of sheep and you're wanting them to understand where they can go that's safe, and you're wanting them to graze in areas that they're not going to be threatened or harmful, right? You would shepherd them. And you would shepherd them to areas that were safe where they could learn and understand and grow and develop. Okay? And that's exactly what the Pymander attempts to do with the individual. By showing the individual bigger patterns that they are a part of and don't realize, and by showing them the implicit God that is within the aspects and sacred geometry of nature, right? You awaken a person's compassion. You awaken a person's reverence for themselves, reverence for other, reverence for the universe. And when these things are awakened, love pours forth. Respect pours forth. Appropriate behavior manifests. Because there is a deeper understanding there that is the antidote for ignorance. And it's the truth. And so by the person realizing, becoming less and less ignorant, by realizing the larger pattern and love and immersions that they're in, they then will behave appropriately. They then will naturally, their humanness will come out of them, their virtue will come out of them, like what happens in the Neoplatonist. Okay, so the Divine Pymander is a conversation between Hermes and the shepherd Pymander. And Hermes addresses Pymander as reason. This has a lot of depth to it. As reason. Now, keep in mind, reason, as I note here, reason both possesses and answers the question, who am I? Think about that. Reason both possesses and answers the question, who am I? And it is reason that Hermes is addressing. So this applies not only to yourself, but it applies to God. Reason does. Because it is reason that is going to present itself to you, namely God is going to present itself to you through reason. And then it is also through reason that you realize God. And we're going to get into all that stuff here as we move through these slides. Okay. So Hermes, as we know, is a mystical figure. And he has a mystical, I'll read it here, he has a mystical out-of-body experience like the vision of Ezekiel or the hallucinations of John on the island of Patmos. Hermes tells a metaphoric story rich with symbolism, informing of the deeper principles hidden within the universe. Okay. So remember, John on the island of Patmos had a hallucination that he translated into the book Revelation. And so it was the hallucinations of a man on an island, isolated on an island, imprisoned there, that formed the entire future philosophy for Christianity. What was going to happen to the planet, what was going to happen at the end times, what was going to happen to everybody. This all comes out of this episode that John has on this island. Okay, and in the same way, revelations often come like that. They come to an individual in an ecstatic state of mind, in a state of mind that is outside the normal frame of reference that you're normally in. If you take a hallucinogenic plant, it will put you into a frame of reference that is off or different than the plane of reference that you're in living life. And this is extremely healthy because it brings new experience to you, okay? And so in the same way that John or Ezekiel had this ecstatic experience, this mystical experience, right? Hermes has that same experience. And the revelations of that experience come out in the Divine Pymander in the same way the revelations of John come out in the book of Revelation. Okay. Hermes begins an internal meditation on the mystery of truth. This is in the Divine Pymander. Let's just stay on the right page here. We are in the Divine Pymander, and this is one of the doctrines. This is some of the doctrines, some of the characteristics that are taught from the Divine Pymander. Okay. So Hermes begins an internal meditation on the mystery of truth. He sits down and loosens from his normal senses, like what happens in yoga or meditation. And you and I both know when we sit down, or if anyone has sat down to perform yoga or meditation, you move into an altered state of mind because you release from your mind here and you align to the mind. You align to the mind of nature, to the mind of God, whatever you want to call it, by releasing from the material concerns, releasing from the concerns of the mind, the anxieties of the mind, the klesha. And by releasing from those concerns, we move into an ecstatic state, a raised awareness state, a higher awareness state, and this is where we learn. This is when we realize new insights that are past the world of concerns, so that we can then resolve, demystify the world of concerns, okay? He performs a devotion like what was taught in the mystery schools of Egypt. He carries out a formulae now lost to time, retiring to his inner self, relaxing his objective senses. He turns inward to the intuitive within. How many times have I said to y'all, the gut mind is always right. This is what I learned from my naturopathic doctor and from Dr. Chen, my chiropractor, when I had cancer. The gut mind is always right. The gut mind is always right. This is why when you walk into a room and you don't feel right, it's usually not right. You're usually correct. When you get around a person, you got a bad vibe, and like, this person's no good for me, this person's bad news, whatever. It's a vibe that comes off of them, and it usually persists. If they leave and then come back another time, you'll get the vibe. Oftentimes they'll walk in the room and you don't know it, and you'll start to feel a weird feeling, whatever, and you turn around and the person's in the room. This is all common. This is all common. This is your gut mind, which is aware of everything, which knows everything. It knows all truth. This is where your compassion comes from. This is where your virtue comes from. This is where your love comes from. It all comes from the gut mind. And see, this is why you don't choose love. You don't choose compassion. You don't choose virtue. These come out of you. No one can bestow compassion on you or can bestow virtue upon you. It comes out of you. And so it is the gut mind that is residing over that place, that exists there and pours out this energy that brings out the humanness in you, that makes you a humane person. Hermes beholds the universe round about him. There is no up, no down, or any objectivity to grasp. The universe begins to open further, and he begins to see an ocean emerging. So just picture, like when you're on a hallucinogenic plant, you lose the sense of space and time, you lose the sense of direction, and you've moved out of the finite world. You move into the wavy world, and in that world, things are not as solid. Things are not as grounded. Things can be manipulated and moved around in ways that can't be done when you're on just your straight conscious sense. In the altered state, you're allowed, or you give yourself access to these concepts which don't fit into the regular state of mind that you're in. And so this is what begins to happen to Hermes. And in that sense, the universe, that altered state, begins to open up further, and what manifests is an ocean. What he begins to see in the endless emptiness is an ocean composed of mind. It is a sea of symbolism elucidating the potentials of God. He is disillusioned and dumbfounded with awe, delight, and overwhelmingness. Like every sage or master told of in antiquity, Hermes cannot place into words the sight he beholds. To commune with Hermes in some sense, out from the ocean of mind, forms a monster. Okay, now I'm going to open this up for you, but the point being here is, in order for Hermes to understand the symbolism that he needs to learn, that the Pymander is teaching him, that reason is teaching him, there has to be some sense of something in order to differentiate. This is where we move into the realm of contradiction, because God is past the world of isms, is past the world of finite, is past the world of ocean or mind. God isn't in any of those spaces. God is past those spaces. But in order for a person to understand, there has to be a world of contrast, which is why the world is the way that it is. Because in order for us to understand the deeper sense in a cognitive realm, there needs to be contrast. There needs to be a world that emulates that deeper sense. And so in order to convey this to Hermes, ocean forms an endless sea of potential that is both terrifying and frightening, and also filled with love. Think of how romantic the ocean is and how terrifying the ocean is. It's both. It is both. Absolutely terrifying, can absolutely kill people. Absolutely beautiful, lovely, speechless when you're looking at the ocean in a sunset or calmly sailing across a sea. I've sailed in the ocean on a catamaran, and it's one of the most magnificent experiences I've ever had. Okay, it's also extremely terrifying because looking down, this bottomless pit there, and there's a whole lot of creatures in there that would love to eat you. And so it contains that in it. It contains the fear in it. It contains threat in it. It contains everything, because it's the unknown. It's the space that, like in the same way the sailor must accord the fear and threat that the ocean represents by knowing the navigation of the stars, by having a vehicle or a vessel that can traverse the ocean, a proper equipment to be able to navigate this ocean, all right? And so in the same way, to navigate this ocean of mind, this ocean called God, there's equipment that's needed. There's perspective that's needed. There's contradiction that's needed in order to understand the conundrum, because it's past words. And so symbolism has to be used. And so what's going to happen here in the Divine Pymander, a monster comes out of the ocean, and you're about to find out what the monster represents. Okay, well, first of all, the monster is a dragon, of course. It's a serpent. We've seen this in alchemy. Remember the rebus, how it's the dragon that's sitting upon the earth, the sacred geometry. Okay, same dragon, same symbolism here. Okay, a dragon appears to Hermes, an expression of mind, an expression of reason, a symbol of light, a symbol of nature, an awe-inspiring sight of the energy. Its spectacle is utterly unfamiliar to human senses and expectancies. The dragon was a power monster, a symbol of the enigma and mind that is nature, movement, capacity, power, and potential. The dragon was the personification, the archetype, the intellect of the universe manifesting. It represented the mind and faculty of nature, and thus the characteristics and personalities of God: mystery, intimidation, invitation, captivation, love, and yet unfamiliar to human perception. The dragon writhes in endless potential, intimating a vast strength beyond measure or realm. Hermes is aghast. Do you see what's happening here? The best way I can put it is this. Let's say, I'm hoping some of you are in your 40s and 50s. Imagine if back when you were 10, 11 years old, if someone told you what was to come in your life, the catastrophes that were to come, the losses that were to come, the challenges that were to come, they were to lay it all out to you. Imagine if that all was laid out to you at age 10, 7. You'd have been terrified. You'd have been mortified. You'd have thought, I don't even want to live this life. I know I would have thought that if I would have known what was coming. I'd have checked out, like, I don't even want to know. No, don't even tell me. It's too frightening to look at. It's too frightening to know and perceive. And this is exactly what Hermes is experiencing. Even though he's seeing the mind of God, even though this is nature manifesting, it's terrifying. Yes, it's love, but it's terrifying love. Yes, it is absolutely terrifying to see this, but this is life. This is what must be accepted, because this is the way life is. So nature isn't going to be nice and present, the initial presentation of itself is not going to be this nice, pretty picture. It's going to be the majesty of it, which is terrifyingly magnificent. You see. The Uraeus serpent on the pharaoh's headdress, the serpent twisting about the caduceus, the kundalini serpent that winds its way up the spine. This dragon underlies all these symbols: sovereignty, authority, divinity, splendor, majesty, and love. Are those not all synonyms for nature? Think about it. Is every one of those, sovereignty, authority, divinity, splendor, majesty, and love, is not every one of those a synonym of nature? This is the same serpent, the dragon that Hermes sees, is the same serpent that's on the pharaoh's headdress right here, which represents sovereignty, authority, divinity, splendor, majesty. The serpent twisting about the caduceus, this is a presentation of power. The power of the kundalini, the power of the serpent, the power of these forces of nature that are past words. This is what this dragon is representing. It is attempting to represent to Hermes these forces that are beyond him and that move and writhe and churn out of the mind of God, round about the mind of God. This monster is not evil, it is powerful. It is not sinister, it is merciless. It is not a master of lies, but a conveyor of truth. Symbolism. You see, and that's, again, the point of being told the absolute truth. Sometimes it's extremely harmful to your own life, to your own self, finding out what the truth is. And so this isn't lies that is causing you anxiety. It's the magnificence of the truth, of the symbolism there. This is why this monster is not evil. It's powerful. It has evil in it, yes, but it also has good in it, yes. And so it therefore is powerful because it has these dynamisms within it. And this is intimidating. In other words, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just simply building a respect. It's building a rapport. It's building an understanding of that which is past you, of that which you are composed. And that is frightening. It's terrifying to find out your potentials, because your potentials are limitless, just like this dragon. And so when Hermes sees nature represented in a limitless potential, it's overwhelming. That's why this is being presented in this way. This is the dragon of eternal mysteries emanating out of nature, like the mystery schools taught in ancient Egypt. The Tao, the course of nature. Essence, the love of nature. Lux Natura, the light of nature. And these things are overwhelming. The Tao, the course of nature, it is beautiful, absolutely. But a part of that course of nature is the destruction of your life, the destruction of your world, and the rebuilding of it. Because that is what nature does. Breaks down and builds up. Breaks down and builds up. That is what you were seeing in the map that I started this lecture with. Building up and breaking down. Building up and breaking down. And it is the constant flow of that that is the point. There's nothing to fix. It's not getting anywhere. It's simply flow. You are flow. Life is flow. Nature is flow. The dragon is flow. The mind is flow. Look at the ocean and the currents. The mind is flow. Endless. All of these are endlessly flowing potentials. That's what's happening. And so it forms the Tao. It self-organizes. It forms the essence. It expresses itself in everything. It forms the light, the Lux Natura. It allows for a life, the contrasts, light and dark. This brings about life. This brings about consciousness. This brings about awareness. You see how all this works then. To have one, you must have the other. And these patterns, when they reciprocate over and over and over and over again, life begins. Life forms. Life is. You see? This dragon wields the merciless, ceaseless fires of reason, nature, art, and mind. Life, death, potential, energy, radiance, darkness, light, consciousness, motion. These are the powers, the fires, the potentials that this dragon is constantly wielding. Go to the next slide. The dragon guards the pearl of great price, the mysterious ball of light, the grail of identity, the mysteries of antiquity. It never approaches man, and those who would discover it must journey to the most difficult and inaccessible areas. Its abode is space, its bed is the clouds, and its hoard, consciousness. It has no concern for life or death, as these are simply features of the grand illusion the first movement of the mind. The first movement in Hermeticism is illusion. The first mind, the first illusion ever coming about was life, the grand illusion. This is the first movement of the mind. Nature, the emanation of God, the embodiment of God, is the first movement. This is a deep philosophical consideration from Hermeticism. And so, because that's a movement out from the mind of God, it doesn't exist because the mind doesn't exist. You see, this is how the world is a dream. The world is the illusion, the dream of God. That's why that comes out of the Hinduistic philosophy, that this is the dream of Vishnu. This is the dream of the Grand Master. Right? So none of the world is real. It's the illusion of the Grand Master, of God, of reason, the dragon. You see, these all are illusory because they're coming out of the mind. And so these all illusions are all sharing the pearl of great price, the mysterious ball of light, the grail of identity, the mysteries of antiquity. All of these concepts are what are within this mystery, within this illusion. And it is the discovery of them, the realization of them, that brings you fulfillment, that brings you emergence and reason, understanding that occludes fear and brings about love. Realizing these deeper insights. That's why these words are used: pearl of great price, grail of identity, ball of light, because it is pointing to something that is past words, and so you use creative words to try and exemplify this enigma. You see, the dragon eternally writhes and twists, but poses no threat to Hermes. For the nature of mind, the dragon, the Tao, the enigma, is unknown to humans, and so frightens those who do not yet understand. It's like the wind. You can't see it, but it's there. You know it's there. And so, can the wind be known outside of experience? No, because you can't see it. You have to feel it. And it's the same thing with God. You must feel it. You must experience it. And this will render it to you. But you can't show it to somebody. You can't hand it to somebody any more than that you can hand wind to somebody. It doesn't work that way. And so this enigma is like that. This is why the dragon is like this. This is why the scene is like this. This is why it's murky and hard to understand. Because that is what the enigma is. And so you move into that space to understand that space. And this is why, just like the only way to know wind is to feel it, the only way to know God is to feel God. That's how it works. And you feel God through seeing these hidden patterns, through seeing this mysterious ball of light that is somehow within all of everything. But it's not your common perception that's going to pick it up. It's going to be your inner mind, the third eye, that's going to find these things. That's why it said you have to go to such faraway places to find it. Thus Hermes remained frightened of the dragon of nature, for he does not yet understand his strand, his essence within the fabric of the universe. So Hermes is still overwhelmed. So the scene that's happening, what's happening with the dragon and all that's being rendered to him, is still overwhelming him. So the scene changes. It changes after Hermes beseeches reason to manifest in a less terrifying way than a dragon. And so what comes out of that? Radiance. A radiance emerges out of the ocean of mind. The radiance carries the powers of the dragon, but it does not carry a menacing or intimidating appearance. Radiance or consciousness permeates all space from the innards of quarks to the singularity of the black hole. These forms are radiance masquerading as time and space. This gets into kind of the Gnostic idea, because the Gnostic believes that it is matter that consumed the radiance. And you're going to find out in a minute. But that matter consumes the radiance in the same way the Neoplatonist sees that matter blocks light. And so it's this idea, take this concept, it's this idea that God embodies everything. That this essence, that this eternal essence that is outside of mind embodies all of matter, and that is what gives life to matter. That's what gives life to the universe. In that All of this matter is imbued with potential. It's imbued with God. You see, and this gives substance, gives meaning, gives tangibility, gives reference to that which is outside of the tangible, that which is outside of reference. That's the point of this. The radiance informs all things, moves all things, radiates within all things. The radiance is reason, and reason takes upon itself the power of awareness. Reason is the bringer of light, and light is understanding. Understanding is love made manifest. For reason poses the question only love can answer. Who am I? And this refers back to when I started the Divine Pymander pages. I showed that it is reason that poses the question and also answers the question, answers the question, who am I? I find that through reason. And in the Hermetic sense, reason is God manifesting. So it is the reason in my mind, God manifesting in my mind, that brings about my knowing and identifying who I am. Do you see what that implicates and where that points towards? It's pointing towards everything is God. That's what this is pointing towards. That everything is imbued with the Spirit of God. And you see that language in sacred geometry. That is one of the languages, that is one of the emanations of God, in that we know that all of matter is a part of God, one with God, in that it self-organizes, which is a godly characteristic, so to speak. Self-organizing universe, and a universe that manifests life and manifests itself like this, right? This is a higher consciousness that we're looking at, that we're experiencing. A consciousness that is past the ideas of science. This is why science is never going to be able to offer you a beginning state, like when it all started or when it's all going to end, or anything can. Because it's past those ideas of beginning and ending, the universe is. You're asking the same question as the person who asks, can God make a rock God cannot lift? It's the same question. You're attempting to take something outside of three-dimensional time and space and put it into time and space, into three-dimensional time and space, and define it. And you can't do that. It's like saying you can be put in a book. No, you can't. I could absolutely write a book about you or write a book about myself and you could read it. Do you really know me? No. You'll have a pretty good idea who I am, but you're not going to really know me. You're going to have to, like experiencing the wind, you're going to have to experience the individual in order to understand. And that's exactly what this is about. Answering the question, who am I, is not handed to you. It is something you realize through reason. You realize it through participation, through risk. Okay. This is going awesome. I'm so happy how well this is coming out. All right, next slide. A mist-like substance of mind began to fill all around Hermes. It was not vapor-like water, but a thicker, fluid-like conditioned darkness that obscured the radiance until it consumed the radiance entirely and folded back into itself completely. Matter, the dark mist, devoured the radiance, and the radiance became locked in the midst of matter. Material matter had fallen from the sky and absorbed and swallowed the light. And then in this interesting how much of the history where there are these pictures and metaphors that there were beings that descended onto the earth and they locked out the light. They compromised the planet and they brought the planet into darkness. And in a very real way you can see in the in the history that's been shared with the West, told to the West, that humankind there was an intervention upon humankind and a darkness was brought in. And this is kind of reflected, or it is reflected in this metaphor here of the radiance, the light that was the essence of God being consumed by darkness. We see that in our own history. Never to be denied, a pillar of light, of truth, of understanding, love, arose out of the ocean of mind. Hermes heard the voice of reason, the radiance, the Lux Natura, the voice of nature pouring forth from the pillar, like a lighthouse shining amidst the darkness. And so we see in the same scene the radiance that was consumed by the darkness. Now out from that ocean of mind and the dark that was there comes forth a pillar of light, a lighthouse that is going to shine truth into this darkness that the world of materialism has brought about. You see this? The voice was the word of mind, the power, the dragon, nature, reason, radiance. This mysterious mind-word power was a kind of instrument of God that came forth out of the ocean of mind, out of reason, out of the vicissitudes of potential, writhing endlessly in everlastingness beyond time and space. Okay, so to reiterate what has happened in the story, Hermes sees the dragon form out from the ocean, and then this freaks out Hermes, and then he asks for reason to manifest in a different way. So reason manifests as a radiance of light that shine the truth. And then this was then consumed in matter to emphasize that the same philosophy that happened in part one, when I emphasized our spirit moving into matter, there are levels and layers that cause concerns in a person's life, and these manifest in their characteristics and in their life choices. And so all these different layers obscure the light, obscure the spirit that you are. And so in the same way, the light, the radiance, was consumed by darkness, consumed by matter. And truth now pierces out through the darkness, through the ocean of mind, and this radiates wisdom, this radiates truth and authority and understanding to Hermes in the voice of the word of mind, the power, the dragon, nature, reason, and radiance. And this is going to orient Hermes in such a way that he can comprehend and see this deeper insight and truth, this higher consciousness of his own identity, there right with him in this hallucination. The lighthouse represents radiance, truth, piercing the darkness, the presence of reality in the midst of all things, the certainty in the midst of chaos, the Lux Natura, the radiance of nature. These are the testimonies of God. God is rendered through lighthouses of reason, patterns, in the immutability of seasons, in the motions of the planets, in the great courses of cosmic systems, in the principles of growth in all things, in the harmonies of elements, in the migratory paths of insects and beasts, in the structures of atoms and cells, in the mysterious sacred geometry undergirding all things. And folks, this here you see how God can be rendered without any need for a belief system. These are simply observances. Look at these top three: the presence of reality in the midst of all things, the certainty in the midst of chaos, the Lux Natura, the radiance of nature. This is sacred geometry. That's what that's pointing towards. The presence of reality in the midst of all things, the certainty in the midst of chaos, the Lux Natura, the self-organizing aspect. The fact that the Earth stays in a constant orbit that allows for there to be an atmosphere and life. This is a self-organizing presence of reality in the midst of all things. Do you see this? The Lux Natura, the radiance of nature, the sun. The sun brings life. We'll study that at the end of this lecture. The sun brings life. Without the sun, there would be no life. It is through light that there is life. You see, and that's why light is truth and the testimony of God. And see, the testimony of God is emulated through the immutability of seasons, the motions of planets, the principles of growth, harmonies of elements. You see, in this way, without needing to believe anything, just observing, it becomes obvious, painfully clear, that there is an underlying organizing, self-organizing essence, beauty, emergence, that is within all things. And that includes you, because you are a nature creature. This is why you have virtue within you. This is why you have compassion within you, and they just need to be teased out. They're always there. They just need to be teased out. And they don't come out because you choose. You don't say one day, okay, I'm going to be more compassionate today. No. It comes from within you. You just are more compassionate. You just are virtuous. You don't choose to be virtuous. You don't pray for virtue. That's not how it works. It is teased out from you, from within you. You see, and it is through understanding, through awareness, through perspective, that you're going to tease this aspect out of you. That's why lectures like this are so important, because it teases out of you that which is already within you. And that realization is seeing God. You see, that's how you see God, is seeing those characteristics, those eternal characteristics, those characteristics of love and compassion. You see them coming out of you. And this is how you see and experience God. Like holding your hand out the window, you experience wind. It's the same thing in observing. You see and experience God through the observing and the giving yourself to life. Now we are going to perform what I like to call an alchemy. Here's the legend. Spirit is equal to density in these thoughts that I'm going to present to you. Matter is equal to effect. Okay? So from matter there is effect. In spirit there is density. Reality is the illusion created by the intermingling of density and effect. And in other words, the intermingling of spirit and matter. That's what all of reality is that we experience right here, right now. We're experiencing the intermingling of spirit and matter, density and effect. And by looking at this alchemically, by performing this alchemy, greater understanding will be available to you as to what is going on. So first mind, the light of reason, leads to the second mind. And the second mind is the 7 objective forces of creation, grounded in natural law. So we saw in the story, reason manifested the ocean of mind, manifested the dragon, manifested the radiance. And these are the second objective forces. This are the objective forces of creation grounded in natural law. So from the first mind emerges the second mind, which is grounded in natural law. And what is natural law? Natural law is the orderly consequences of created bodies and worlds. This is self-organizing, already happening. The orderly sequences of creative bodies and worlds. And you see the orderly sequences in those examples that I just gave you in the other slide. Do you remember? I just showed you those. Let's go back to those and just let me say them real quickly here. You see, in the immutability of seasons, the motions of planets, the principles of growth in all things, structures of atoms and cells, okay? We see this here in natural law in the orderly sequences of creative bodies and worlds. Okay, let's keep going. Natural law. Sacred geometry is the density, the language which becomes flesh, matter, effect. Nature renders the sacred vowels from whose combinations form the names of God. Okay, so the names of God are expressed in sacred geometry because sacred geometry is the language of God. Okay, sacred geometry is the Word made flesh. You are seeing the Word made flesh when you look at a mountain, when you look at a tree, when you look in the mirror. You are seeing the Word made flesh because all these things are based in sacred geometry, which is God manifesting. It's the language of God manifesting. That's why it's so important to know about it. And see, this is how nature renders the sacred vowels. Sacred geometry is the vowels whose combinations form the name of God. Do you see how clear that is? It doesn't take a rocket science to get that concept in your mind. Okay, that leads to these together shape the demiurges, matter, which are resistances to spirit. Okay, so in Gnosticism, they taught that the demiurge was this evil creature that came out of the mind or landscape of God, right? That because it was matter, it contained no spirit. You see, because it was effect. And so it was from this matter that all of material life came about, so all of life was tainted, you see. But I don't see that as a tainting. I see that as simply, this is just matter manifesting. And it manifests in contrasts, and it's easy to conclude, it's easy to confuse those contrasts as being in battle, as though good is fighting evil. These are simply characteristics. There's nothing to be afraid of. In other words, there's no reason to be afraid of the demiurge, of matter. Don't be afraid of this, because then you're just being afraid of yourself because you're composed of matter, you see. And so this is simply resistances to spirit because spirit is beneath the matter. It underlies and undergirds the matter. It is a part of it. It is one with it. And so in many ways, the spirit is the matter is the spirit. In many ways, these two things are reflections and harmonies of each other. And the experience of life is the commingling of them. And if you get caught up in traps and ideas that are false, you'll think that there's a problem going on. You'll think that one of them has to win and one of them is going to lose. You see? And this catches you up in the belly of the demiurge. You've been consumed by the dragon when that happens because you've been consumed with fear, because you've been consumed with the idea that something is wrong here, that something has to be fixed, that the universe is fouled up, and it's not. It's not. Demiurges matter, therefore, are the infectious effects of resistances to density. And this speaks to why your soul came here. Your soul came here for effect. Your soul came here to have the experience of matter. That's why you came here. So if you think of matter as being this evil, terrible thing, well, you're condemning your whole experience here. You're contaminating it. Because you're forcing it into this idea that something's wrong when spirit becomes matter. There's nothing wrong. This is just how God manifests. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. The human collective is the outpouring of these sacred densities, geometries, which emerge from the potentialities of God. Don't be afraid. The human collective is simply the outpouring of sacred densities and geometries. That's what we are. We are an outpouring of God. And if you make it into a battlefield, if you make it a conflictive thing, well, then you're the one who's making hell out of life. You're the one who's building anxiety, encouraging anxiety, fomenting anxiety, because you're forcing the world into something that it's not. You're forcing the world into a conflict, and it's not in conflict. You see? The human being is reason potential embodied by way of natural law, and that's the point. You are simply embodied natural law, embodied God. There it is. This is and natural law is the orderly sequence of created bodies and worlds, and there's your alchemy. That completes the circle right there. And that circle constellates this center legend. Reality is the illusion created by the intermingling of density and effect, and this is how it happens. And there's nothing wrong. It's beautiful. This is all an expression of the first mind, the light of reason. That's what this is. This is all an expression of the first mind. Yes, it's illusory, but it's beautiful. Do you have beautiful dreams? Do you have dreams that are so beautiful that you wake up crying? Okay? It's the same thing. We're in a dream. And it's absolutely beautiful. There's nothing wrong. It's absolutely beautiful. Yes, there's tragedy in the dream. Absolutely. There's also greatness and prosperity and so forth in the dream. It's all there. All potentials are there. Here we are again. The human being is reason potential embodied. What was the ocean that appeared to Hermes? Reason and potential embodied. What was the dragon that appeared to Hermes? Reason and potential embodied. What are you? You are reason and potential embodied. Stop trying to separate these things. Stop trying to put yourself in a compromised position. You are not in a compromised position. This is why you're not a sinner. You are not compromised. You have all potentials within you. You are not condemned one way or the other. All of your life is determined by your own choices, which is your own responsibility. There's nobody out to get you. There's nobody trying to get you. As far as the spiritual world is concerned, it's an illusion to make you afraid. And when you begin to see life in an alchemy like what I've just presented to you today, it begins to clarify in such a way that you no longer feel like you need to fix it, and you can actually just go out and enjoy it. You can actually just go out and experience it without all the harm that goes along with the baggage of believing that something's wrong, that there's a conflict. You see?
However, the alchemist, he was searching for the one thing which must ultimately come. He was searching for the master key to the total transformation of matter. He was convinced that what we call matter is in reality spirit in disguise. He knew from his own experiences that everything that is not spiritual is a kind of spirit, limited, blocked, or impeded in some way. Therefore, every error is some kind of a truth that we have not yet mastered. Every delusion is a fact out of focus. Every failure tells us something about a success that lies within nearer grasp because of the reverse we have passed through. His challenge was not to conquer nature, but to release nature. As one of the great alchemists, Bacillus Valentinus, said, the end of alchemy is man becoming the voluntary servant of nature. And that wisdom is not the ravishing and ravaging of nature. The wisdom is man achieving a subtle, sensitive, spiritual rapport with nature, in which man can cause nature to open her wonders, reveal them without fear to the being who is without fault. This is almost exactly the wording of Valentinus. And it is the idea, the concept of man persuading, man inducing the universe to give up its secret. and this secret to be won only by man's love and not by man's strength. Won by the wisdom principle, the acceptance of the challenge and the acceptance of the responsibility, both together. So in the Hermetic philosophy, we have this pattern outlined, gradually unfolding through the Hermetic books, which conceal it under allegory and legend. But what the Hermetic philosopher was seeking for was this wonderful, mysterious powder of transmutation, the red lion. The mysterious power which changes all things instantly. And that mysterious power was, to his way of operating, some way locked up in the mystery of universal or divine mind. That this mind had some way within it the power of the spontaneous release of itself. That mind as the bridge between nature and God can be crossed. And that this mind can, in some mysterious way, open a blazing core of facts by means of which the individual becomes master of the world. Not because he becomes its ruler, not because he becomes richer than someone else, not because others honor him, but simply because he has achieved mastery over illusion. That he stands in the full awareness of the glory of the creating power. That he accepts totally the highest of all scientific facts, and that is this fact of the eternal presence of this gold, this mysterious substance locked in everything.
Okay, we're going to finish it up here with the 7 principles of Hermeticism. These are also a part of the Divine Pymander, our continuing look at the Divine Pymander. These come out of that. And these 7 principles of Hermeticism, you could think of as sort of the 7 doctrines, the 7 principles, the 7 ideas, the 7 truths that Hermeticism emphasizes to understand the world, to understand the world that you're in and the identity that you are. Mentalism, all is mind, the universe is mental, the mind of God manifesting. So all is an illusion, a dream of the mind of God. You see? We just mentioned that earlier. The first movement is the reason is the first movement out from the mind of God, and the movement, the first movement, is an illusion. The manifesting of material matter, the manifesting of reason, is an illusion. It's all in the mind. So don't get taken by it. Don't get caught up in it. Enjoy it. Enjoy the mindscape that is living life. Enjoy it. That's why you came here. You came here to have a great time and enjoy the world of physical matter. Correspondence, as above, so below. This embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws of phenomena and the planes of life and being. Macrocosm, microcosm, and vice versa. And you see, that emulates, and this is a great example of this, is the correspondence with the location of the planet in regards to the center of the galaxy, and how that relates to the history that happened on this planet. They are corresponding with each other, and by recognizing one, you can better recognize the other. That's why looking at that map earlier helps you recognize the larger correspondence you are embedded within. And when you understand the larger correspondence, you will behave more appropriately, my friend. Okay, next slide. Vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. All is within a state of destruction and rebuilding. From death comes life. And we talked about that earlier. I mentioned that earlier, in that all of life is vibration. All of life is frequency. The universe isn't going anywhere. It's not trying anything. It's simply being. It's a state of vibration. It's a state of construction and destruction. That's it. That's how it works. Black holes explode, form all kinds of dust particles, which then reconvene, form planets, systems, suns, all this kind of stuff, stars, and then that recondenses and forms another black hole. And on and on and on, endlessly it goes. There you go. The meaning is that experience. The meaning is that rotation, that circular reference. That's the meaning, the bigger picture. That is what's going on. Nothing needs to get done. Nothing needs to get fixed or resolved. None of that is going on. The state of being, vibration. There you go. Polarity, everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything comes in pairs of opposites. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Explicit and implicit. All truths are half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. And here we see, and as I've mentioned countless times in these videos, everything is dual. The God manifests through polarities. That's how God manifests. And how we know and understand, therefore, is through polarities. By uniting the polarities, and then we see the oneness that underlies them. You see, and this is the importance of polarity, is that it renders to you the oneness that is behind the illusion of opposites. You see? Rhythm, everything flows in and out. Everything has tides of rising and falling. Rhythm compensates the give and take of everything. Seasons come and seasons go in rhythms from the resonations of higher realms. And we talked about that in part 2. The seasons occur because of the location or the design that the sun is placing upon the planet, namely a serpentine design. And so out of that rhythm comes our seasons. This is correspondence. The rhythm is coming out, or the correspondence is also causing rhythm, which is also polarity, night and day, winter and summer, spring and fall. You can see the polarity in all these things, and it's all vibration. You see how all these speak to each other? They're all congruent with each other. They all work well with each other, these different principles, these 7 principles. Cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, while every effect has cause. All happens according to laws of nature. Chance is named for that which is not recognized. Coincidence doesn't exist. There are many causes, but nothing escapes law. Life is a singular event, eternally unfolding through cause and effect. And I don't want you to get caught up in that second sentence there. Check this out. There are many causes, but nothing escapes law. That doesn't mean you're in a prison. That means you're in an organized chaos. The law is the organizing aspect of the chaos, but it's still chaos. So you're not trapped. You're in the midst of both. You're in the midst of cause and effect. Both are in play. Just like your poor decisions are in play in your life as much as your good decisions are in play in life, because you live long enough, both of them intermingle with each other. And so the cause and effect is just simply the cause and effect from those choices that you make. You see, and the cause and effect follow the laws as what's been laid out here in this Hermeticism, the polarity, rhythm, vibration, these things that we've been talking about. Okay, gender. Everything has masculine and feminine properties. Gender manifests on all planes. Even electromagnetism renders the penetrating force, obviously male, of the photon is directed by the magnetic force, obviously female, of magnetism. And again, we see gender in everything, and that often comes across in the rebus. Here, I'll just jump here to the next slide. Okay, and then summarizing here, mentalism, vibration, polarity, correspondence, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. These are the 7 principles. And see here we see in the symbolism that we've used before, the rebus, there's gender right there, androgyne. Do you realize and understand that God is an androgyne? Because God has potential, both female, and God has potential of male. Both. God is androgyne. So there's gender there. Right? This just helps you understand. Cause and effect. Rhythm. Correspondence. Do you see the correspondence between the rebus and the dragon? They're corresponding with each other because they're outpourings of each other, as the serpent is an outpouring of sacred geometry, which is an outpouring of the rebus. Do you see? These are all connected. They are all in correspondence with each other. The dragon, nature, is a reflection of the sacred geometry that undergirds nature, that is nature. And so in the same way, the rebus, this androgyne, is an outpouring of the fundamental powers of nature, the positive and negative, the good and evil powers that are pouring forth from nature. Don't be afraid. Fear is not the beginning of wisdom. It's the beginning of enslavement. Don't be afraid. And that's these principles, that's what Hermeticism is attempting to do. It's attempting to take this monstrous thing called life, called reality, and help you not to be afraid of it, so that you can enjoy it, so that you can bask in it. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing that needs to be fixed. You see, and the symbolism is speaking to this, and these 7 principles of Hermeticism are speaking to this. And to go further, Hermes is an embodiment of the philosophies and characters of nature in the same way the Buddha is an embodiment of love and compassion, or Jesus is an embodiment of atonement and grace. These figures are archetypes for larger principles. Their philosophies are their emphasis and concern. Their historical value is of the same value as your body. Z. Zero, folks. That's why I wrote that. Z. Their value in history, their value is not their history. It's not of any value or conclusion to you to know if Hermes actually lived or died, and it's the same with Jesus. I'll get that in a minute. But the value is not in the history, it's in their principles. Your soul and gifts are your reference and value in the same way concerns and emphasis are the value and essence of archetypal figures. These figures are archetypes. In other words, you don't worship an archetype. It's a representation of a larger principle, of a valuable principle, but you don't worship the principle. This is why you don't worship Hermes, you don't worship Thoth, you don't worship the Rebus, you don't worship Jesus, you don't worship Buddha, you don't worship Allah, you don't worship any of these things. They're not there to be worshipped. They're there to be experienced. They're there to be known. They're there to bring you love and understanding through what they represent. Key, their philosophies are their emphasis and concern. That's why there's Hermes, that's why there's Erebus, that's why there's Buddha, that's why there's Jesus. It's because their philosophies are what are attempting to be emulated to you through the metaphors of their life, through the metaphors of their symbolism. That's why Jesus spoke in parables. That's why Hermes speaks in symbolism. It's because they're pointing to the deeper perennial philosophy that undergirds all things. They're just going about it in different types of embodiments. But see, if you worship Hermes, if you worship Thoth, if you worship Buddha, if you worship Jesus, if you worship Allah, you are engaging in idolatry because you're worshiping the principle. They're not there for history, they're there for their principles. Just like you, your soul and gifts are your reference and value, which is your art, which is your character, which is your love and compassion that you show to others, that you show to the world, that you built in the world. This is the you that you're leaving behind, not your body. Your body is meaningless. What you look like is it doesn't matter. There's no concern. What is of concern is what is in the heart, the soul, what is emulating from you. The passion, the love, the gifts, the abilities that emulate out of you. That is your value. And in the same way, it's the emulation, it's the principles that emulate out of Hermes, out of Thoth, out of Jesus, out of Buddha, out of Allah, out of these figures that is of import. That's what matters. So don't get caught up in the figure. That's the lesson. In the same way, don't get caught up in your body. Don't get caught up in carnal concerns. Don't get caught up in idolatry. You see, this is why the church wanted people to worship Jesus, because it catches them up in the principle, and therefore they will become irrational. Because if you're caught up in the principle, you're caught up in a smaller world. The principle is to be seen, recognized, and integrated into the bigger picture. This is why it is so important to not get caught up in a single belief, because then you'll become a bot for that belief, and you'll never know otherwise. And therefore, you become a slave. You become entrapped to the embodiments, the philosophy, the characteristics of the belief system, whereas the whole point of life is to express these things out of you, not out of the belief system, out of you. How you see the world, how you understand the world. That's why your opinion, different than mine, is a beautiful thing, because you see the world differently. So when I go to a museum, do I want to see all the same paintings? Or do I want to see a different painting in every room? I want to see a different painting. So when I go and meet people, do I want to hear all the same opinions? Do I want to be in an echo chamber like what happens at a church? Like what happens at a mosque? Where everybody's echoing the same principles, the same philosophy, the same opinions, the same language? There's no variety there. You want to go to the museum, where you can see all different kinds of opinions. You can see all different perspectives. And from that, understand the world in a deeper resonance than what any one picture could offer you. This is why variety is so important. This is why it's so important not to get locked into any one particular set. Can you see that? It's why it's important to not get caught up in any one set, any one belief, any one way, because then it consumes you. You will be consumed by it. This is why exactly The sinner fights to stay a sinner until the day they die. They are consumed with their belief. It is all they see. They are blinded to a larger world. My father, I love him to death. I love him to death, but he is blinded by belief. He is blinded by the Christian world, and that's the only world he can see, and therefore he is in a smaller world than what actually is. And common sense will tell you that, and these lectures will tell you that, will show you that. It's a larger world than what that religion can present to you, because life is a philosophy, it's not a religion. That leads to this. Kavit and Tur will finish up with this for today. Reason can fall in love with its own thoughts and form partnerships with its own productions. This descent or departure from its original center, from the authentic reasoning position, was the first motion, and from this motion created the supreme illusion, existence as we know it. Illusion always arises from reason falling in love with its own thoughts, and this is why it's so important. Don't fall in love with your own conclusions. I like to stay in a state whereby I'm happy to be wrong. So if my opinions, and I'm not going to release them easily, but if my opinions are shown to be wrong, are shown to be messed up, then absolutely I will learn more and adapt my life to that. It's when you get caught in finality and caught in absolutes that you're going to run into trouble, because you're caught in your own illusion, because the world life is an illusion. And so the whole idea is not to get caught up in any one singular illusion, but to be a part of the grand illusion. That is existence. That is the enigma. That's the conundrum within the conundrum. Because you are in an illusion. Yes, it's not a reality. It's an illusion. But by golly, if you're never going to have a reverence for that, if that keeps you in the idea of like, well, life is an illusion, it doesn't matter, you know, who cares? You see, that's going to lead you down a dark path, because you're always going to feel like life is meaningless with that mindset. You have to appreciate the illusion. That is, like, you have to appreciate the illusion of what you are and who you are. You have to appreciate these illusions, because this is what will bring you fulfillment, compassion, love, understanding, truth, and free you from ignorance. Love you guys. I'll see you next time. We will continue in our video here in our series on the Ineffable. The next thing we're going to be talking about is the progressive refinement of man's consciousness. We're going to be talking about how we refine the consciousness once we realize the illusion that we're in. So we've been talking about this time the illusion that we're in. We're talking about the illusion that is God, and how it's very hard to get perspective of that. And by looking at the map of our history and the map of the location of the planet in regards to the galaxy, that helps us understand the larger frame of reference that we are within. And so by understanding this next segment, the progressive refinement of man's consciousness, we will better appreciate that larger world that we are in and a part of and resonating with. Okay, I love you guys. See you next time.